radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening, Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio for the masses. Today's Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. Days into the new year, only 135 days left. 325 days left. Oh, man. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of nowhere. A total undisclosed location. But it is beautiful in here. I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer, and UNX Networks. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? How you doing? Yeah, man. Tonight, right here, very special guest, Micah Hanks, joins us. Shall I say returns? Returning to discuss the recent Chris Mellon article at the Debrief. That article was called, "Why is the Air Force AWOL?" which means absent without leave, when you disappear. Why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP issue? That was the headline. And if you haven't read the article, I told everybody to go and do it. You really need to read it. And you probably, if you haven't, you'll read it after the show tonight. Let's go over to the Debrief. Scroll down. I think it's now at the bottom of the homepage. They've got too much stuff that they post every single day. So it's down there. It was released last week. I think... I could have this wrong. I'm thinking February 3rd-ish. 3rd-ish. Let me see if they have... oh, you know what? They did this backwards this time. I think Chris's byline is at the bottom of the article. So you have to scroll because this thing is... I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood just north of 250,000 words. And, yeah, this thing is long, man. I'm still scrolling. I'm just looking for the date, man. Where's the date on this? Yeah, February 3rd. So I did all of that when I had it right. I thought I was going to correct myself. February 3rd. It's at the bottom of the homepage over at the Debrief. Like I said, if you haven't read it, you'll want to read the entire piece by Chris after the show tonight. Or you can have it up during the show. The internet is really cool, like that. You can open, I don't know if you know this, but you have your site open in front of you, whatever your flavor is, you have it in front. You can open up another page at the same time. That's right. Check it out. Check it out. Some people call it Diet Coke. I mean Tab. You don't open a Diet Coke. You open a new tab. That's right. It's pretty cool. And that is tonight on the show. Tomorrow night is another Fader night because it's Thursday with open lines all night long. I will also be over with Christina Gomez tomorrow afternoon for her show. And this week we are covering, a great show tomorrow. The Kingman, Arizona UFO crash. That is tomorrow over with Christina Gomez. All of that is up in Twitter. All right. So that's what's going on tonight. I wanted to say this really quick. And don't ask me why I thought about this right before the show. But at CLE this weekend, I was hanging outside after dinner with a group of friends. And the subject came up about sharing a hotel room with some friends, say 3, and there are 2 double beds. Not family, friends. Do you sleep in a bed with a friend of the same sex? Do you do that? And so because this large group of friends of mine, 3 of them, women, were sharing a hotel room. And I said, hey, how does that work? Right? He said, well, 2 of us, and then one of us, we either get a roll away. I said, so what, 1 king-size bed? Well, in this case, yeah, we couldn't get 2 doubles. But okay, so if you have 2 doubles, what goes on? Well, 2 in one bed and 1 in the other. Why? What's wrong with that? I said, nothing. But men don't do that. Right? They were like, what? I said, what do you mean? They said, Jimmy, you wouldn't sleep if you had 3 friends. You're out on a fishing trip. You got 2 double beds. I said, man, I'm sleeping on the floor. That's the answer there. He ain't sleeping in a bed with a dude. What? Women don't have issues with that. And I get it. That's fine. That's fine. Men do. And and I'm not so sure if a couple of my other male friends that were there were like necessarily agreeing with me, but they didn't say anything. That was the other part. Nobody defended me, but nobody spoke up either. Yeah. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. I mean, share always. Yeah, see, yeah, but Kaz, you're of the opposite sex. Okay, but okay, men, the Fadernauts out there, who is going to step up and say that they were just out fishing on a fishing trip and 4 men, 2 double beds, and they just shared? I want to see who that is. I want to see who that is. Oh man, I don't know. I'm not wrong. And I don't care what it ain't gonna happen. Sleep on the floor. I'd sleep on a tile floor. I'd sleep in the bathroom. Sleep in the tub. There's just no way. There's no way. No way. Anyway, so it just came up. All right, where am I at? Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. At JChurchRadio. Exactly, Lisa Reed. I'd rather sleep on the couch, says Lisa. What if there's no couch? What if there's no couch? Ken Priest. Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah, I'm you know what I should do? What do you guys think? Should I do stand-up? I mean, I'm not that funny, but I don't mean it like that. But I think these are questions that need to be asked. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. The Sandbox is hashtag F2B on Twitter. That's right. Hashtag F2B on Twitter. I was just over in the chat rooms right before the show. Hello to everybody that's listening all around the world. And let's go. We've got to, nothing wrong with that. You men will all get drunk and pass out together. So what's the difference? Never happened. Not even in a drunken, no. No. Is it acceptable to sleep with a female friend? I've done that. I've done that a lot. But that's different. And that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. There's no way to shift this conversation into another direction. I'm talking about one thing and one thing only. Dudes on a fishing trip, 1 hotel room, 2 double beds, 4 guys, 3 guys. What happens? I'm just telling you. Let's get to the breaking news. A child's tooth unearthed from a French cave has revealed the earliest evidence of humans, Homo sapiens sapiens, living in Western Europe. The discovery of the molar from the Grotte Mandarin in southern France, along with hundreds of stone tools dating back to about, check this, 54,000 years ago, suggests that early humans lived in Europe about 10,000 years earlier than archaeologists had previously thought. That's right. Previously, the arrival of early humans in Europe was dated about 43,000 BC to 45,000 years ago, according to the remains found in Italy and Bulgaria. History's getting rewritten every single day. Well, the Air Force's tech incubator, you're thinking it's DARPA. It is not. It's called AFWorks. AF for Air Force Works. WERX, AFWorks, has been given the go-ahead for 11 design concepts aimed at pushing the frontier for aircraft that can take off and land vertically. Among the team selected is the Vertigo Arrow, which is based in Florida and has Eric Lindbergh as co-founder and executive chairman. He is the grandson of aviation pioneer Charles Lindbergh. AFWorks' challenge focuses on technologies that the military could use in vertical takeoff and landing aircraft that could include next-generation helicopters and flying cars. The challenge is being conducted for the Air Force as well as the United States Special Operations Command. Mazda owners near Seattle have found their radios are permanently stuck on NPR. Apparently, owners of the affected Mazda vehicles have only been able to tune in to the local broadcaster and NPR affiliate KUOW at 94.9 FM on the dial, with reports indicating all functionality of the infotainment systems have been disabled, everything except for the volume knob. I'm not making this up. The cause? KUOW's transmission of album cover images without a valid file extension are causing the onboard software to flip out and lock on the Mazda's radio right there to NPR. Note to all of the radio station marketing people out there, this is how you get more listeners on the cheap. Screw up the file extensions. European scientists say they have a major breakthrough in their quest to develop practical nuclear fusion, the energy process that powers our sun and the stars. The UK-based Jet Laboratory has smashed its own world record for the amount of energy it can extract by squeezing together 2 forms of hydrogen. If nuclear fusion can be successfully recreated here on Earth, it holds out the potential of virtually unlimited supplies of low-carbon, low-radiation energy. The experiments produce 59 megajoules of energy over 5 seconds, 11 megawatts of power. This is more than double what was achieved in similar tests all the way back in 1997. Now, it's not a massive energy output, only enough to boil about 60 kettles worth of water. But the significance is that it validates design choices that have been made for even a bigger fusion reactor that is being built right now in France. Well, the James Webb Telescope has begun the 3-month process of aligning the system. In the past day or so, for the first time, photons from distant stars traveled through the entire telescope and were detected by the Webb's near-infrared camera, otherwise called the NIRCam, instrument. It was a huge moment in itself, and it lays the groundwork for alignment and finishing the process, which relies on data collected by the NIRCam. Webb's 21-foot primary mirror consists of 18 hexagonal segments, which launched in a compact configuration, right, all folded up, and it unfolded after it got into space. The alignment process will get all 18 working as a single light-collecting surface. There are 7 phases that it's going to go through for this alignment, which will key on imagery web captures of the bright star HD 84406. The mission team will take photos of the star, and each one of the 18 mirror segments, they'll take that, they'll line everything up, and that information will shift the segments into their proper positions. We are months away. More on that in just a bit. Happy birthday to today, Joe Pesci. That's right. No, Joe Pesci's not on the phone. Just thinking about having Joe call in, but not today. He's 79 years old. Tom Hiddleston today is 41. Of course, he's Loki. That TV series, Loki, that was amazing. Carole King today, 80 years old. 80 years old. So that means Linda Moulton Howe is 2 weeks older than Carole King. Our dead guy's birthday today is, I need a serious moment of silence for, Jimmy the Rev Sullivan. 1981 to 2009, died at the age of 28. The Rev was the drummer, composer, songwriter, vocalist, and pianist of Avenged Sevenfold. During his short life, he quickly became one of the most respected drummers in the world. The Rev won the award for Best Drummer at the Revolver Golden God Awards, and number 8 on the Ultimate Guitar Readers Poll of the top 10 greatest drummers of all time. On December 28, 2009, the Rev was found unresponsive in his Huntington Beach home and was later pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. The last song the Rev wrote for the album Fiction was called Death. And when he handed it in, he said, "That's it. That's the last song for this record." 3 days later, he died. Incredible. Happy birthday, the Rev. On this day in history, 1942, daylight saving time is instituted. And back then, on this day, Congress called it wartime. That's right. On this day in 1942. Here's your Fader fact. And I know you didn't know this. The Hula Burger. Okay? The Hula Burger was a meatless burger introduced in the 1960s by McDonald's. The burger was a slice of grilled pineapple with cheese and a bun. It lasted for 3 months. The world wasn't ready for a meatless burger. Actually, that doesn't sound that bad today, does it? Right? Toasted bun, right? And, if you did it correctly, grilled pineapple, cheese, toasted bun, barbecue sauce. Yeah, that would work. That would work. And that is your Fade or Fact. Tonight, very special guest Micah Hanks returns. We're going to be discussing the recent Chris Mellon article at the Debrief. It is called, Why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP Issue? Tomorrow night's another Fader night with open lines all night long. Right now, I need to hit this River Moon coffee. RiverMoonWellness.com. Joe Pesci. That's Tara. How you doing? I'm going to ask Micah what he would do. 4 friends, 1 hotel room, 2 beds. I'm just curious. Micah Hanks is here tonight. I don't have to work. Micah Hanks is here. I just get to I'm going to, opening question, I get to kick back. That's it. Got a professional on the show tonight. And now I just talked about the James Webb telescope, RiverMoonWellness.com. Now, as we wait about 3 months for the James Webb Space Telescope to fully come online, can you imagine the drama that will unfold when an image pops up and gets seen by the world of, actual life on another planet? Can you imagine? Now, the image, and it's about when, it's not about if it's going to happen. Okay? But the image will be in the infrared, which is much better for revealing secrets than, say, just a full color normal thing, like you take with your cell phone. Infrared will show the lights of a city, of technology, of action on another world. Civilization just coming to life at night from the dark side of another Earth. Think about that. It'll be the biggest thing ever to happen in the history of everything here on the third rock from the sun. So to fully understand the moment, you need to get a grasp of time. And I know that some of you get it. But even those that do, you need to get centered on the science. And for the rest of you, here it goes. If the Webb grabs a shot of a planet a million light years away with its Christmas lights on and all of that stuff, we are not looking at the now. We are observing that planet as it was 1 million years ago. That planet is actually 1 million years more advanced than the picture that will broadcast around our Earth in the now. And to flip this around, if the same planet is looking at us right now, they are checking out Earth 1 million years ago. They won't see New York City all lit up. Nope, sure, you're going to see signs of life. You're going to see water, atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, all the good stuff. But they're not going to see Tokyo nights. They're not. But let's move things closer. Let's say 1,000 light years away. We find a planet 1,000 light years away. Now we're talking. That planet would see us in the year 1022. You got Jesus, running around. And yes, cities and towns burning candles at night, windows of thousands of homes illuminated in communities around the world every 12 hours. And if we move things much closer, say to some of the hundreds of stars around Earth that are 50 light years away, just 50 light years away, well, they'll see it all. Bright industrial centers burning through the darkness. This same technology is now available to us. It is coming online as I speak to you tonight. And soon we'll start to observe these distant planets. And trust me, we will, in the months ahead, be looking at life on another world that is not our own. In 25 short years, we have gone from discovering the first exoplanet to literally checking out whatever we want, wherever we want, whenever we want. But here's the thing. Be careful what you wish for. The question of whether we are alone or not in the universe was always the number one thought in every head of every citizen of planet Earth. Now we have the ability to get the answer. But can we handle it? Of course, I think we can. We've been ready for it, but very soon, in the months, not years, ahead, we'll find out how our world is going to react to this news. And it may not come from a flying saucer on the White House lawn, nope, but from an image file from the James Webb Space Telescope. Think about that. Seriously. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, on this broadcast, coming up right after this short break, Micah Hanks is here, returning to discuss the recent Chris Mellon article over at the Debrief. That article is called, "Why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP Issue?" Go and check it out. You can follow along with us. The article is right there. Scroll down to the bottom of the Debrief, thedebrief.org, and check it out. Tomorrow night is another Fader night with open lines all night long. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us.
This is Nicole Church, daughter of you-know-who, and you're listening to Fade to Black on JimmyChurchRadio.com and the Game Changer Network.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net.
Introducing the Game Changer blend from River Moon Coffee that delivers a customized blend made specifically for the Fadernauts. If the game is rigged, change the game. It's a bolder cup with some bite. Game Changer is the coffee of choice for those that prefer an organic dark roast that is slightly lighter and milder, but it's still dark. With wild notes of pecans and chocolate with a rich, balanced, full-bodied cup that is roasted to perfection for a great coffee to start your day, as an after-dinner coffee or anywhere in between. Artisan, small batch roasted to perfection. USDA certified organic, all River Moon coffee is freshly roasted and packaged in the USA. Just go to rivermooncoffee.com or click on the banners over on our site and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. rivermooncoffee.com.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can get our podcast for just $2 per month. All you have to do is click on the podcast banner over at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, folks. It's troubling times, and fear is pushing emotions, which in turn pushes health the wrong direction. Do you ever get an ache because life is uneasy? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea works on your digestive tract, helping to move food through quicker and comfortably so your health is spot on. Life Change Tea may not help with world issues, but it will help with your digestive issues. A glass a day helps keep the intruders away. So, change your life today. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. If your health game is off, get on by ordering Life Change Tea. Getthetea.com. And while you're on our site, look around at the great non-GMO organic supplements. And if you're a sales shopper, go to our specials page and see what's for you. I've been drinking the tea for 12 years, and I'm sure glad for its health benefits. Again, that's getthetea.com. Getthetea.com. The tea that makes you go.
The new KUNXDB, the UNX Network, bringing you the best in paranormal programming in premium high-definition streaming audio and video. Log on to the network at unxnetwork.com and check out the growing lineup of programs, including Jimmy Church, Whitley Strieber, Micah Hanks, and many more. Sign up for the free UNX newsletter, follow the UNX blog, or pick up the latest edition of the UNX magazine. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So check us out at unxnetwork.com. Tap the show page and the calendar so you never miss your favorite live shows and podcasts. We are your portal for all things paranormal. The X, explaining the unexplained.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Manson, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks returns. We're going to be discussing the amazing, the long Chris Mellon article over at the Debrief. It is called "Why is the Air Force AWOL?" on the UAP issue. We all want to know. Micah is a writer. He's a podcaster, a history fanatic, science enthusiast, philosophy junkie. Current events, cultural studies, technology, unexplained phenomena. And I'm done reading this long bio. We've got too much to discuss tonight. And on top of that, we did no sound check. Micah's like, Church, I'm a pro, man. I don't need to sound check. And I said, here we go. So we're going to sound check right now. How you doing, Micah?
Hey, I'm hanging in there. Hopefully it sounds okay.
What?
Can you hear me?
Micah. How you doing, man?
Well, these are interesting times. And, I guess that's just about it. We always start these programs like that. Interesting times indeed. These have been the most interesting last few years. I think for anybody who follows a topic like that. But, hanging in there, I'd much rather things be interesting than the alternative, right?
Yeah, exactly. Where we got to fish for stories. And now you mentioned something to me earlier today. So I was going to do it in the bio, and then that's why I bypassed everything and just got to the end. You mentioned to me about something concerning you and your position over at the Debrief. Is that something that you can mention publicly?
Yeah, it is.
Is this wait? Is this the first time that anybody's going to hear this? Certainly in the media?
I have talked about it on my show already, but, I like to kind of...
Well, that's promoting yourself. You can't do that on your own show. You got to let guys like me do it for you.
Well, then for that, yeah. In
Okay,
that regard, no. You will be the only member of the media to whom I have said this in a format like this. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So can I say it? I'll blow it. But you are now the editor-in-chief at the Debrief.
That is correct.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow, you don't look any different.
You seem really excited, though, on the other hand.
I mean, that is great news. That is what changes for you?
Well, I add that to all the other stuff I do, which is mostly behind the scenes. If you look at a website like the Debrief, I'm fiercely proud of this. We get people on Twitter all the time who will say, "Who funds you guys?"
It's the CIA. It's DARPA, right?
Yeah, well, it's one of those 3 to 5 letter agencies.
Right.
No. All kidding aside, I tell people, I'm fiercely proud of the fact that we launched, Tim, MJ, and I, we did that ourselves with a little help from the credit card in my back pocket. And in truth, everybody put both time, at times investments. I mean, the great thing is when you're doing a website, depending on how you do it, the investments can be minimal. They can also be extremely expensive. But again, we were able to cut those costs by me essentially building the site, and I mean, right out of the bat, we brought Steve McDaniel in, and of course, he's been a tremendous help. But it was kind of crazy there at first because, I mean, Tim, MJ, and I, we launch. Steve jumps on board right there near the outset. And then we began to start fielding the queries, people wanting to write, people wanting to help with marketing. And, Chris Playing, Chrissy Newton came on board, Christina, everybody. I mean, Christina Gomez has been such a tremendous aid in our endeavors, and so many others too. And, it's really kind of been interesting having this family grow around us. That said, then there's your real family, right? There's your work family that you love, and the people that you surround yourself with, and the stuff, your interests that you share. Then there's your real family. And MJ, of course, is a father of children, beautiful little children. He has a lovely wife, and he's been working for years, of course, as a history teacher, but he just recently took a new job. And there'd been some talk about shifting things around a little bit, but he finally came up to me and he said, listen, you are already handling so much of the editorial behind the scenes helping me. At this point, I want to talk with you about just, passing that along, which seemed like a natural thing because, I mean, honestly, I think we're all, MJ and I especially, editors in some capacity. That's the thing at the Debrief. The way we've done this since we launched, everybody is wearing several hats. But, again, I think that's also been better in many ways. And so, yeah, I'm fiercely proud of it. I'm sure I won't be the last guy to wear this hat right now. I'm following the footsteps of the great work that MJ did, and definitely kind of doing things a little differently. One of the great benefits, Tim McMillan and I, we get to work a lot more closely in this regard. But, keeping this ship running has been great. And boy, I tell you, I don't think it's every day of the week that somebody takes a gig like this or assumes a new priority or a new aspect of the business that they have to manage in addition to other things. Because I've been doing the newsletter. I've been also one of our features writers, also a news reporter. I've been doing some site design and maintenance on the side too. Lots of different hats. But my first official gig, assuming this position, was a little article by Christopher Mellon.
Right.
About why the Air Force is AWOL on the UAP issue. So that was quite a wild ride, Jimmy.
Yeah, it had to have been because it's a lengthy article, and my concern was you have to have taken English in high school. You didn't. You majored in metal shop. So how are you?
All kidding aside, when he says metal shop, ladies and gents, he means playing a Stratocaster in my bedroom for 8 hours a day instead of doing my homework. But no, I actually did pass English honors with straight A's. No joke.
Yeah, you know what? I was great. English in school for me, I enjoyed it. I excelled, always straight A's. It was just math with me.
Yep.
That there was no way I was going to be a physicist or a rocket scientist. That was not in my future.
Is that just a guitar player thing, Jimmy? Because, I mean, it was the same way with me. I could sleep through English honors and make straight A's.
Right.
But math was always, and I've always just assumed you're either like a letter person or you're a number person.
Right. And no, I agree with that. It's one side of the creative brain is going to be okay with certain things in Excel, and then you don't have, I just don't think you can do it all. So your brain is like, okay, I'm cool with this. You're going to be great. You're just not going to be a rocket scientist. So you need to change. You're not going to be a chemist.
I'll tell you where the math started really coming together for me, though. And there's a great book by Professor Jordan Ellenberg called How Not to Be Wrong, The Power of Mathematical Thinking. When you can start applying math to things in the real world. See, that's a class I avoided back when I was, maybe a freshman, sophomore in high school. Never wanted to take physics. But then when I started realizing, oh, wait, hold on, you mean you can use equations to express, fundamental behaviors of reality as we know it. That's when it started getting fascinating. And, so in my later high school years and then on into college, And keep in mind, by the way, I dropped out of college to go work in radio.
Right.
That's the truth. But I never stopped learning. I'm still, of course, always have my nose in a book. But man, reading Einstein, there's that misconception that, Einstein was bad at math. That very well may have been true, but he was obviously good enough to have been able to precisely work out with elegance the equations that outlined the reworking of our knowledge of the universe that he presented us with general relativity. And you go back and you read his writing. Again, he seemed to be more like one of those English guys. And he once said, I'm paraphrasing, he said a lot of great things, but this is one of them. Einstein said, it's not necessarily that I'm smarter than anybody else, but I've definitely stuck with the problems for longer.
Yes.
And so,
yes, he did say that. He did say that. And here's what I did, Micah. The great courses, which I subscribe to, I love it. Most are 30 courses long, or 30 segments long. It's an investment of time. So I take the physics course.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
I know you did.
I take the physics course, and I get like right after the first, and then I get to I'm like, wait a minute here. Physics is easy. Right? So, they take you to the basics, how to solve, a basic thing about here's the thing, here's the mass, here's the thing, and it's got to go from point A to point B. You got the distance, and you're going to, plug in the blank. And so I get to like 4. I get through 4. I'm taking notes, man. I'm taking this real serious.
Yeah, I'm glad you are, and I wish more other people would.
Well, too. No, hold on. I didn't finish.
Uh-oh. I'll go. Here we go.
I got to 4, and I was like, I can't do this, man. I'm done. I fooled myself. Physics is easy. No. No. There's 26 more courses in that block that will never be seen by me.
But let's just say it's easy up until you have to start learning calculus. But now imagine if you had been Isaac Newton, and rather than just having to learn the calculus, you had to develop it.
Invent it, yes.
You had to invent a whole new branch of mathematics just that you could calculate the curvature, right? It's incredible. But what also is incredible to me about the creation of calculus, I actually am enough of a dork now that I have all kinds of books on the history of mathematics and the history of science. That's a subject that really interests me.
Right.
And in a book I have on the history of calculus, of course, you had Newton that was developing this, but then you also had the German mathematician, right? Leipzig, I believe, who was also at the same time developing that. Now, it seemed in that instance that it was a fairly logical necessity at that point, at the current state of knowledge, that they would both be developing what we would recognize as calculus today. But what's really fascinating is that when you look more deeply at the history of science, you actually often see the simultaneous discovery at almost, literally, the same time, but in different parts of the world where there is such a degree of separation that two people never could have known one another or could have been rivals. As in the aforementioned case with Newton. The simultaneous innovation of ideas, it's almost like ideas emerge into human consciousness. Now, this is going to sound a little out there, but bear with me. It's almost like these ideas are just sprinkled into our reality, and some people start working on it, and the discovery, put up air quotes, happens simultaneously, but in more than one place. That actually is something that is recorded throughout history more than once, and that really fascinates me.
Yeah. Tycho Brahe, what he was working on, Galileo, they're trying to figure out how to put together a telescope and how to polish lenses, and they ended up through great distances. They didn't have telephones, but they got a correspondence going. But that was different. How do I say this? Different views of math and what would turn into physics. It was basically philosophy back then, but would turn into physics and geometry. Everybody was okay with talking to others that were trying to move this forward, because there were plenty of institutions that were pushing them down and holding them back. So the only way that they could move this forward is have a little correspondence with a couple of other like-minded people out there without discussing it. And Newton had the challenge. See, because at that time, Newton had his toes dipped in like 3 or 4 camps. Alchemy, religion, math, right? And he was a student of all of that and wanted to learn about all of that, wanted to write about all of that, wanted to teach about all of it, but you couldn't mix it up. You couldn't do it. And he was dipping his toes in all of it at the same time. And I think, didn't he succumb to, didn't he have he had some kind of toxic poisoning in the end, right? Was it lead poisoning? What was it that took him down?
Not sure,
That
but I would
mercury,
imagine.
was it mercury poisoning? They tested his hair, recently of hair, his hair samples. It was like mercury. So he's doing his alchemical, trying to, the Philosopher's Stone and trying to crank out some gold at the house. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. Please, everybody, save your email. But that's probably pretty close to what was going on.
I was going to say that could be an unwanted byproduct of the attempt at transmuting base metals into gold.
Yes.
Who knows?
Yes. All right. Well, let's get to UFOs, man. The article. Okay. Let's talk about the one thing that is in front of everybody when they see this. Holy crap! It's long. Now you're now the editor in chief.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you go to Chris Mellon and go, Chris? We need to get this, it's 150,000 words. We got to get it down to about 200. Right?
Well,
something's got to go. I'm being extreme and I'm, being a little cavalier here, but that is a challenge. What did you decide ultimately what to do?
Well, it was a book-length manuscript, and we had to pick the best 7,800 words at the end of the day. So, no, I'm kidding. No, there was a lot of editing, that went through this, and I wasn't the only editor. I was very, welcoming of the process that Chris wanted to go through on this, which was he submitted the article, but, his son had been very involved. There'd been a number of other researchers who'd been involved behind the scenes too, some of whom I guess I won't mention right now, just because I'm not 100% certain that all of them would want to be named. I can definitely mention, Brad Sparks. I can mention, Paul Dean, of course, Australian researcher Paul Dean, because they're mentioned and thanked at the very end of the article. So, and Hunter, of course, is Chris's son. He's also mentioned there. So there were a lot of people who were offering feedback, editorial criticisms. Hunter was doing a lot of the actual editing. I did a once-over early on, and then at the final, hour, then it was up to me to go back through and check things. And we finally got it the way that we wanted. But, something else that people will notice is that the format of the article, apart from its length, the format's also a little different. And, at the end of the day, we could talk all about the nitty-gritty. In my view, Jimmy, the article is so important in terms of what it is conveying about a very serious problem. That problem is very simple. If indeed the skies are the domain of the branch of the military that we in the United States call the Air Force, why have they seemingly been less involved with the UAP issue? And again, Chris isn't the first person to point this out. Many have pointed this out. I think that he has really laid the problem out there and in almost granular detail presented, first of all, the equipment and the technologies at the Air Force's disposal, and then also, of course, the problems with their lack of involvement. Now, me, I'm a history guy. And this not only was the first thing I actually did with the debrief, having formally taken over as the editor-in-chief. I've done a lot of editing, along with MJ up to this point. But this was also the first time that I ever really had significant interactions with Chris Mellon. And so to go into a project like this where I'm emailing with him sometimes every hour, several times, I found it enjoyable. But again, what you never lose sight of working on something like this is the fundamental importance of what this article is about. And so I hope people who look at it and say, okay, this is really long, I hope you'll take the time to read it. And I hope you'll see this. I hope people at home who read this article, they're at the debrief, they will see this as being a little different from how traditional publications would feature an article. I mean, it is lengthy, not that The New Yorker and other, magazines have not published lengthy things. And in fact, anybody who read Gideon Lewis Krause's article in The New Yorker about UFOs a few months back, I think that was much longer than this one. But it's a bit more of a narrative format, whereas Chris really, I mean, he has bullets and lists, and he has, quite a structure in the way that this came together. So all that said, I think that we all got it about as close to being how we wanted it at the end of the day, and the effect has been quite significant. Let me just say there's been a lot of traffic. Of course, The Hill covered this. I've actually been on a couple of interviews too, because we've gotten so much attention that I've been helping out with a lot of the promotional stuff. And, and again, I hope at the end of the day that people do realize, wow, okay, this is an issue. But being the history guy, I'm here to tell you tonight, ladies and gents, this is nothing new. This has been something that's been going on for quite a while when it involves the USAF.
It was written in a format, and when we come back after the break, we will dive into this, and we're going to be doing this for the rest of the night. It's going to take a lot of attention for everybody to focus in. We're going to do that. But before we get there, to me, it is written like a published paper in a professional peer-reviewed journal. It's got everything but footnotes and salutations, and it's got everything but that. But it is written that way. The sensationalism, the shock and all of that, what writers do, and I do it, you do it, but that's not here. Chris wanted to stick to the facts and have it flow in a way that is presentable, like a peer-reviewed journal. This could be peer-reviewed and fact-checked.
Yeah, I mean, if it were structured slightly differently, you're absolutely right. And again, looking at somebody like Christopher Mellon, who for a long time, I think for a lot of people in the UFO community, and myself included to an extent, he and Lou Elizondo and people like that were kind of mysterious. There was that certain mystique, that surrounded the whole To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences early on, because they weren't doing a lot of interviews, and Chris still doesn't do a lot of interviews. I was very, very pleased and, of course, thrilled and delighted, of course, to have him too on my podcast, the Micah Hanks program this week. We actually talk about the article on the show, and so that was, as fun as being able to work with him on getting this thing through to production. But I think that the thing that mystique that kind of surrounded Lou and Chris early on, I think the downside of that is that although it got people really excited about UFOs, a lot of folks, to me at least, seem to fail to recognize that what we have here with Chris Mellon, for instance, is a guy who worked in the intelligence community. This is a person who put his name and his good name. He's a recipient of numerous medals, mind you, some of the highest that can be awarded by different branches of the intelligence agencies. Here's a guy who is willing to take all of that and potentially risk throwing it all away or tarnishing that good reputation for having significant, more than most people, more than most ufologists for that matter, having significant association with this topic. And I have to say that given the outcome since 2017, the complete shift, some would call it a paradigm shift that is currently underway, the way that the tone has shifted on this topic and the way that people address it, we have to recognize we're all the better for it, and the tremendous role that Chris and Lou have played, and others too, in helping bring that to fruition. Because again, and this is part of the problem, the U.S. Air Force stiff arming, to borrow language that was featured in Politico last year, which actually was quoting Chris Mellon. This article by Brian Bender was talking about the fact that some agencies were stiff arming the UAP task force, dawdling on getting information or just not being compliant with supplying the information altogether. This problem has existed even in government, and without guys like Chris and Lou and others, coming out there and saying, look, we came from within government. We recognize that problem. We must raise awareness, and we've got to try and push this ball further down the court because this issue is important to all of us. Everybody, not just Americans, not just the Western world, everybody on this mud ball we call planet Earth. This is very important. And so, I commend those guys for the work that they've done. It's very important stuff. And I hope, again, that articles like this one are going to keep that dialogue going. And yes, like you said, we've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, we do. And now there's two ways to look at this, and we'll set this up because we're going to come right back after the break. Got 2 minutes, Micah. There's two ways to look at this. That Chris has offended the Air Force and they will continue to do the stiff arm. Right? Or the other part is everybody that goes AWOL has to come back into the fray. Right? You can't be absent without leave forever. So will the article light a fire and encourage the Air Force to get involved? Which way do you think this is going to play out?
I don't think they should be offended. I don't think that there's anything offensive in this article. That actually came up behind the scenes, so to speak. The notion that, someone actually raised the question, how would this reflect on Chris, raising these points? How would people on Capitol Hill respond to this? And again, admirably, Chris essentially responded and said, these points I'm raising are deserved. Attention must be drawn to these things. I have no doubt, by the way, that people on Capitol Hill have been paying attention to this article and that it has gotten a lot of attention from lawmakers and also, people in the military. People in other branches of government, for that matter. I have absolutely no doubt about that. That was Chris's intent in writing this. I mean, he said this is intended for people in Washington, many of whom he sent it to directly. So the point is that, again, first of all, I don't think that the U.S. Air Force, as though this is some sort of a large, looming giant with feelings. No, this is a branch of the military. He is raising some points. The result of this in the past, this kind of thing, has been that lawmakers obviously have taken this seriously because we have seen the establishment of the UAP task force. We have seen, Congressman Gallego and then also Senators Gillibrand, Rubio, and others bringing this amendment for the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022 that you and I talked about last time, the Gillibrand Amendment, which ends up being passed into law. But that, in addition to the establishment of this AOI MSG by the Pentagon, the net result up to this point has been a lot of action in government based on the interest that this has generated. My hope and my take would be that rather than this being something that would be offensive or that would push people further away from the topic, I hope, past being prologue as it is, that it's going to bring more attention to it. That has already happened in the last few years. I don't see why this case would be any different. And indeed, it needs to be like that. This needs to bring more attention to these issues. And we're beginning to get a glimmering of an idea that indeed may be the case, as I'll tell you when we come back from the break.
Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks. We are talking about the Chris Mellon article featured over on the Debrief. It was released February 3rd. You can go over to the debrief.org, and it is right there. You can follow along with us tonight. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer and UnX Networks. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, VX.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Because you never got that pony you always wanted. Damn it. Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network.
Listen, I know, and you know, that you've always wanted your first crystal skull. Or maybe you're a collector just like me, but you just don't know where to go to find the real thing. Then I met Carolyn Ford over at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. Carolyn is the guardian of Einstein, one of the most respected ancient crystal skulls in the world. All of her unique skulls have been imprinted sitting with Einstein in his sacred lodge and are carved from the finest gemstone and materials. Imprinting is the process of receiving the ancient wisdom from the master skull or master computer, Einstein, the ancient crystal skull. To see Carolyn's current collection of crystal skulls, just visit her store at EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com or click on the banner over on our site. Don't forget to use the promo code Jimmy at checkout to receive 10% off of your order today. That's promo code Jimmy. Finding your first or next crystal skull is easy. Just visit EinsteinTheCrystalSkull.com. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roasted to the dark side of fade to black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today.
Hello, I'm Katie and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Well, we are also Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you can become an official Fadernaut by just going to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com.
Hello, this is Serena Wright Taylor from Conscious Life Expo, and you're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, who holds the Lucky Pony record for the best astrological chart since 1963. True story.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is here. Returning. Just had Micah on last month, and this article broke, and I spent much of my day on Thursday, and I was prepping to leave to the Conscious Life Expo, and I read through the entire article, Micah, twice, and was trying to absorb everything because I love details. I love documentaries. I love, movies and things. But my heart lies in information, nonfiction. I really like to go there. And, well, that's exactly what this article does. And I kind of want to start at the beginning of the article because he points out directly, he's talking about, how do I say this? The ability to detect stuff and different systems that are in place, specifically different radar systems, and probably the best, most advanced systems in the world are all ours. And we have got a lot of advanced things going on in space, on the ground, and so forth. But he breaks that down. Why do you why do you think that Chris took this approach first in laying out the article? I just muted you. I thought I did the opposite. You were already on. Ah, man.
Well, hopefully I'm back now.
Yeah, you're back.
Important.
You're back.
Really
Okay.
Yeah.
So why this approach to start in with such a technical subject like advanced radar systems?
Well, I think let me preface that by saying that when we talk about what historically have been known as UFOs or what we would call UAP today, it's kind of a threefold approach. And, I always try to look in the chat room and see what people are saying during the break. Some people had even mentioned, we talk so much about the government and its interest in UFOs, and there's so much less focus placed on the UFOs themselves. I got to sympathize with that. I mean, at the end of the day, aren't we really interested in understanding the dynamics of these craft, how they function, what they might be, where they might be from, what kinds of circumstances people have, observed these under, what kinds of people in general see them? I mean, all those kind of things are fundamentally more interesting to me. There has been a tremendous amount of interest placed on the agencies that look at this phenomena in recent years, and that's really kind of led the narrative. I'd like to get back myself to looking at the phenomena. In some ways, Chris's article does that, and in terms of those three approaches I was talking about, on the one hand, you've got the phenomena itself. On the other hand, you've got the technologies that can be used to kind of help us detect them. And then you've got, on the other hand, the people who look at UFOs, whether they are civilians, military officials, scientists, in the academic establishment, which we're fortunately seeing more and more of right now. As to why Chris takes the approach that he does in the article, I mean, again, I can only speculate, but I would presume that is to try and say, hey, listen, first and most fundamentally important, the United States Air Force is tasked with defending our skies. And something that a lot of people, here's a bit of a preface for you, a lot of people had begun to notice in recent years. I saw an article by Ty Rogaway over at the War Zone about this. The Debrief team and I had talked about it plenty. And many others had commented on the fact, why is the Navy producing all the videos? Why is the UAP task force under the Department of the Navy? Why is it always Navy warships where we're seeing UFOs and things like this, these drone-like objects? Maybe they are drones, but, in any case, being unidentified, they effectively are UAP. Why is this always happening around our Navy warships? Why is there so much emphasis on the Navy while the Air Force, you would think, would be the ones who would be producing a lot of information about this? To Chris's point in the article, in fact, they are more than well equipped to be able to do so, and he looks at several of the technologies. Some of the ones he lists in the article include the Space Fence, the world's most advanced radar, solid-state phased array radar system, or the, I think formerly it was the BMEWS, now it's known as the SPARS or the SSPARS. There's the Global Infrasound Acoustic Monitoring Network, U.S. Space Surveillance Network, Space-Based Infrared System, Active Electronically Scanned Array Radars, and then, of course, the Federal Aviation Administration. That one's near and dear to my heart because the FAA has been probably the primary focus of a lot of my reporting there at the Debrief. And we can get into that a little later, too. But again, very glad that someone like Chris Mellon is also bringing attention to the fact that the FAA, much like the Air Force, had, until I finally got a quote from them last year, they had continued to say they didn't investigate UAP at all. They finally admitted to me, after a lot of dogging them, that indeed they do. And now when they get eyewitness sightings, either by traffic controllers or by pilots, that can be corroborated, this is important, with radar, and they have some sort of instrumental corroboration, those reports are now logged and sent to the UAP task force. Presumably, they may go to a successor organization, but keep in mind, the AOI MSG only is going to be looking at special use airspace. So that would seemingly eliminate a lot of different airports if they aren't used or frequented by military. So, again, I think that we have to look at all the tools, you might say, in our toolkit, so to speak. And that's what Chris is fundamentally outlining. With these tools, the idea that unknowns are not detected and that the U.S. Air Force, even if they did detect them, that they did nothing with that information or paid no attention to them, it is either unfathomable.
I think it's untrue. And let me tell you, I'm going to jump in. because to me, as a reader, what I got out of the reason why Chris pointed this out is that these systems are so friggin' advanced that they are designed because they're seeing everything. And he points out in the article that they can detect things as small as a marble. So with that, you are seeing everything, from birds to aircraft and everything else that is in between that could be in the skies. You have to be able to separate the clutter. What are you interested in? And then once you start to peel that stuff away, and with these advanced systems, you can tell whose aircraft it is. There are radio signals, friend or foe. This stuff is out there too as well. But the other part is, once you have figured out whose aircraft is what and what is flying, and then you have something else there, a UAP, now you can collect that data too, and they know when a UAP is in our airspace. And I think that is what he is pointing out, that they can't continue to stiff arm because they know with these advanced systems, not only in space, but on ground, on ships, everywhere in airports, that they are able to determine what is there and collect that data. And that's the point that Chris is making. Where is this UAP data that they are collecting with these advanced systems?
Yeah, well, the other side of this too, again, is, coming back to that point I was making earlier, and, all your points, very valid, Jimmy. It's either impossible that they couldn't be detecting these things, or if they are and they say that they aren't, then that is a tremendous oversight on their part. I mean, that raises more concerns than anything else. And so then we're left saying, well, if you guys say that you're not paying attention with all of the equipment capabilities, knowing how much and how often the Navy seems to be detecting these things, if the Air Force is not doing the same, again, to me, I think we can essentially rule that possibility out. There is no way, based on the outline that Chris provides in the article, in terms of the equipment at our disposal, there's simply no way that the U.S. Air Force is not. And I think we all intuitively and logically can discern that. So if we can rule that one out, then we're left with only one other possibility. They are either lying or they are ignoring. Now, I don't want to try and, make a strong claim or to try and, come up against them. Our Air Force is lying to us. Although perhaps there is some historical precedent for that at times, and also for a degree of controlling of the narrative, which we'll talk about a bit later too when we get into the history. But I definitely think that what we have to recognize is that in any case, if their official position is that they aren't finding UFOs or evidence of unknowns, and they are certainly not supplying significant amounts of information about what they detect to the Navy and its UAP task force or any successor organizations, I mean, this is I would dare call it a national security issue, a concern. Because again, if there are unknowns in our skies, what's being done about that? Is it just being overlooked and ignored by the branch of the military whose job it is to surveil the skies? I mean, again, that's a real issue to me.
And he ends the introduction with our space-based radar systems, and that specifically scan in the infrared, and also the ASA system, but which takes me back to Radcliffe and his comments about fast walkers and that we have been monitoring stuff coming into our star system, into our solar system, and into and back away from, leaving Earth too as well. And that stuff is detected by the satellites that we have in space, correct?
That's what we've at least heard. Yes, indeed. And again, here's an interesting one, and Chris and I actually talked about this. What's really interesting is not so much the fact that we can track unknowns in our airspace and that they, from time to time, also may be tracked. I mean, there are a lot of things in orbit. And of course, NORAD's capabilities, as I understand it, extend to space. As you mentioned, we've talked a little bit about the world's so-called most advanced radar, right? The space fence. I'm actually looking at the LockheedMartin.com website with a page about this, which Chris, I believe, links to in the article. Again, now the world's most advanced radar provides uncued detection, tracking, and accurate measurement of space objects, including satellites and orbital debris, primarily in low Earth orbit. But the really interesting idea here is, surely they must have the equipment capabilities to detect objects that actually first appear in orbit, but then actually make the transition out of space and into the actual atmosphere. If there are objects entering our atmosphere from space, guys, look, we should be very quickly and easily able to rule out any known contenders in those instances. If you don't have a rocket reentry or a planned satellite reentry, I mean, there are systems you or I can log online, and we can follow those systems and know when we're expecting satellite reentries, rocket reentries, spacecraft reentering Earth's atmosphere from traveling into space. And when we don't know what we're seeing coming into our atmosphere, I mean, again, not only is that easily discernible, but that's really an outlier, because that's not any kind of conventional aircraft. It's probably not any kind of unnatural phenomenon, or rather, I should say a natural phenomenon, because again, meteors, space rocks and what have you, that's a fairly common thing. And we know how those kinds of things, those sorts of natural possibilities, how they would behave. We're seeing clearly in some instances objects that appear to be controlled. They are capable of not only incredible acceleration, or as the UAP Task Force report, the ODNI report from last June said, unusual flight characteristics. Again, if we were to expound on what that might mean, that might seem to indicate acceleration, stopping on a dime, turning. Again, meteors don't change course in flight, but often these UAP are described as having done that. So presumably, if the space fence is capable of detecting something along these lines that has these kinds of anomalous characteristics in its flight path, and it also is traversing the boundary from orbit into our atmosphere, I would be very interested in that. Now, one more thing to add to that, though, and Chris points this out in the article also, NORAD's also got its Pathfinder AI program, which is presumably attempting, it's designed to do this anyway, to identify patterns in various things that are detected. And, if it is capable of spotting patterns and trends in unknowns, even if we don't know what they are, I mean, it would be very interesting to imagine what kind of data might be gleaned. And in fact, that's what Chris asks in the article at one point. He says, it would be fascinating to know what patterns NORAD's Pathfinder AI program may have identified among the thousands of incidents of knowns and unknowns identified by NORAD. And that's right, I said thousands, and he talks about why there are thousands. We can get into that a little later, too.
Yes. And then as he starts the article, he ends with this, with his intro. And I want your comment on this. It is just profound. And he, you know what? I'm going to say right now, Chris didn't pull a single punch here. He didn't soften any blows. He didn't pull any punches, which is this. He says, it's also worth noting that in addition to the 144 UAP incidents identified in the DNI's preliminary report, civilians reported tens of thousands of UAP to civilian organizations like the Mutual UFO Network. During the same period, often with photos or video. Further, hundreds of commercial airline pilots reported seeing UAP. How likely is it then that no U.S. Air Force pilots encountered UAP during the same period? That's what we all want to know. How is that possible?
I don't think it is. That's the thing. Now, in the ODNI report, the authors do say that the task force had been coordinating with the U.S. Air Force, and that future efforts would include more involvement from the Air Force, but there was no clear indication in the report that the Air Force had been supplying information on UAP it collected directly to the task force. And that's a point that Chris, makes in his article, and I'd asked him at one point as well. I mean, is it your understanding that the Air Force had not been supplying information? And indeed, if we go back to his Politico article from, I guess it was probably in May of last year, it was, a few weeks before we actually learned via the New York Times and its advanced reporting that the report was complete, that some on Capitol Hill had already been briefed about it, and that we'd be seeing it on time, and in fact we did. In that article that Brian Bender did in Politico, I mean, he quotes Chris Mellon saying, I've heard it directly from some members of the U.S. Air Force that they were told, right, don't willingly provide any information to the UAP task force. Everything's got to be cleared, and we've got to go through one of our other agencies. We want to manage this very carefully, in other words, but that's where the term stiff-armed came up, because, again, members of the task force, they were supposed to be granted all of this information that's been collected by branches of the military and the intelligence community, and it seemed like that was indeed not what was happening. Now, I might be able to understand. I mean, again, there's historical precedent when we look at the NSA. I don't necessarily agree with it, but then again, I also don't understand all of the specifics because they've never released this. Back in the 1980s, Citizens Against UFO Secrecy, calls, right? Peter Gersten and, of course, Barry Greenwood, Larry Fawcett, a lot of guys, Brad Sparks, they were diligently working to try and use the Freedom of Information Act to appeal to government agencies to get information on UFOs. And they did a tremendous job. A great book was written about this effort collectively by Greenwood and Fawcett. It's called Clear Intent. It was republished under the title The UFO Cover-Up. You can still find it online. But this book outlines of every different agency and the successful and sometimes unsuccessful attempts at trying to appeal to these agencies with FOIA to get information. When it came to the NSA, and this was the real sticking point, the NSA didn't want to supply. First, they said that they didn't have anything. But then I think in response maybe to, I think it was an FBI query, it was either the FBI or the CIA, they get a response from a query saying that they had to get permission to retrieve certain files, I believe, from the NSA, and thereby inadvertently revealed the fact that the NSA had documents. So they referred to that in a subsequent FOIA and said, this agency says you guys have got files, which you recently told us you didn't. We want to know what's in those files. So then they were given some files, but they were also told that there were, a significant number that would not be revealed. This led to a lawsuit. And what ended up happening had been that a district judge ruled in favor of the NSA and said that, the public interest is not significant enough in comparison to the national security threat that this might pose if these documents are released. It would release information that our enemies might be able to exploit and use against us, information about how we collect information. And it just, so again, what we can kind of extrapolate from all that, Jimmy, is that it seems that the detection of UFO information from time to time is like a byproduct of our other intelligence gathering apparatus and information systems. The problem is they want to protect that, but the UFO information isn't released as a result. Now, that is an instance, I think we could say, maybe where you would expect some information wouldn't be passed along. And, I have to say that even if I would really like to see those files, I could justify in my mind why we haven't. John Greenwald and plenty of others have continued to try and get those NSA files. Now they say they don't exist. What happened? Were they destroyed? I think that's against the law. But it's a whole different story when we see the UAP task force saying, we're not getting information from the Air Force. I mean, this is a branch of the military.
Well, is it because I don't want to ruin your train of thought.
No.
But is it because after the Air Force publicly closed Blue Book, that lawmakers, policymakers, Capitol Hill just stayed away from the Air Force and didn't want to talk to them about UFOs, and the Air Force got used to that, and maybe people were just on the civilian side gun shy, right? And they didn't want to approach, and then the Air Force just got acclimated to it. And they felt like they were, covered in Teflon, and they didn't have to answer questions about UFOs.
Well, I have a slightly different take on it. I think that what you outline, the period in history and its relevance to all this is key. But I have a different take. I don't think it's that people just stopped going to the Air Force, and therefore they were like, oh, we're out of that game. I think that actually what happened was the Air Force by the mid-1960s really wanted to get out of the UFO investigation business. There are a number of reasons why, and we can go a little deeper into that. But what we saw happen essentially was they said, look, okay, we are at our wits' end and perhaps also at the limits of our technical and scientific ability to study this. We need to try and get the scientific establishment to look at this. They went, of course, historically, this is well known. They went to numerous universities and they couldn't get a university to take their money and study UFOs for them until they finally came to the University of Colorado. There were some sympathetic members of the staff who were, they were amenable to the idea of this kind of a study being done. And that, of course, famously led to the Condon Committee under Edward U. Condon, formerly known as the University of Colorado UFO Project. The result of that, and again, that's a whole other conversation, but I'd like to touch on that a little too throughout the conversation here. The result of that study, in short order here, was simply that they said, look, there's no scientific benefit that we found to UFOs being studied. And because of that, our advice to the federal government is, since science isn't being advanced, don't study UFOs. Taxpayer dollars shouldn't be wasted on this. Now, maybe years later, Condon later said, we could come back and we could revisit this subject, maybe when we're better equipped technologically and scientifically. But right now, we don't see any benefit. It's no coincidence in my mind that the next year, I mean, anybody can see what happened there. The following year, the Air Force closed Project Blue Book, and they had their official stance remained for decades. That, we carried out the longest systematic study by a military body of the UAP. They called it UFOs, but that subject, we don't study that anymore. Now, here's the catch, and this is where things get really interesting, though. As recently as maybe 2015, there was still a fact page that I found archived on the Department of Defense website, which had a actual statement on UFOs, and it said, "As you may know," it actually says this in the fact page. "As you may know, the Department of Defense, or DoD rather, never studies this any longer. As of the closure of Project Blue Book in 1969, the military is out of the UFO investigative game." What's of course paradoxical about that is that in 2015, we know that there had been, prior to that even, the ALSAT program that James Lukatsky ran out of the DIA, which is a combat support agency to the Department of Defense. But then we also have the ATIP informal initiative, as they say, which Lou Elizondo was a part of. All that was going on while the DoD on its website said, "As you know, we don't look at this issue anymore."
Right.
And that all goes back to the end of Project Blue Book. But again, in my perspective, it wasn't a matter of people just quit going to the Air Force. The Air Force had been looking for an out, and they were more than willing to accept it when the Condon Committee said, our advice to the federal government, stop looking at this.
And again, and back to your point and Chris Mellon's point, it's an absolute impossibility that Air Force pilots have not witnessed UAPs and UFOs in the skies and filed reports, and they've collected data in addition to all of the super advanced radar installations that they've got watching the skies, that they have no interest in UFOs, or that they don't know what's going on, and they don't have information to share, not only with the task force, but with the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and here's the thing. I mean, if we go back in history, again, there is documented evidence that supports the idea that even after Blue Book, there continued to be methods and procedures by which UFO reports could be gathered and could be processed if indeed they were deemed to be something that was of significant enough national security interest. You remember Stanton Friedman talking about, of course, the famous Service Mare Int communications instructions for reporting vital intelligence sightings. I actually happen to have a copy of the document right here in front of me, and it says, 1, Service Mare Int instructions lay down procedures for reporting information on vital intelligence sightings for hostile or unidentified aircraft, missiles, unidentified flying objects, hostile or unidentified submarines, surface vessels, etc. And it goes on. But I mean, the point is that they had said, I mean, this of course presumably remained in effect probably for decades after Project Blue Book. There certainly was still a official template for, if you see something you can't explain or something that is of vital intelligence significance, you should report it. Here's who to report it to and how to report it. And they spell it out. They list unidentified flying objects. So, I mean, to say that they didn't continue to collect information, I mean, come on, guys. It's right there in your documents. Sure you did.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Micah Hanks. We're discussing Chris Mellon's new article over at the Debrief, Why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP issue? We'll be discussing this all night tonight in depth. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
You're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
This is Jimmy Church. Jason Martell's book, Knowledge Apocalypse 10-Year Anniversary Edition, is now available. Most ancient cultures speak of a time when their gods visited them. They never say their gods came from across the ocean or from the mountains. They always came down from the skies. Was ancient man visited by gods or extraterrestrials? We have not been told the full truth about our human past. There was a time when all the ancient cultures lived amongst beings they considered their gods. The search for truth leads us down the path of learning where the ETs might come from and why they are here. To understand some of these advanced topics and learn the truth about human origins, buy the new book from Jason Martell, Knowledge Apocalypse, now in its 10-year anniversary edition, available on Amazon.com by clicking on the banners over on our site, or simply visit jasonmartell.com. That's jasonmartell.com. Do you want to be an official Fadernaut? Of course you do. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black. Just go to our membership section at jimmychurchradio.com. Fadernauts. When you think about the future of our country and where we're headed, do you wonder about the food supply? I do. Disruptions in the food supply chain could be disastrous, and they usually occur with little warning. That's why the smartest thing you can do today is to stockpile emergency food, water, and other essentials. I personally recommend My Patriot Supply. They're the nation's largest emergency preparedness company, serving millions of customers for more than a decade. In fact, they're the only source my family trusts for our preparedness plan. You should too. Right now, save 20% off a full 4-week supply of delicious meals that provide 2,000 calories a day. Saving 20% helps too, doesn't it? Especially now. So go to preparewithjimmy.com and get ready. That's preparewithjimmy.com. There's no time to lose. Do it now.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRAradio.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Micah Hanks is with us tonight. In-depth discussion on the recent Chris Mellon article over at the Debrief. It is called, Why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP Issue? But before we get back to the article, Micah, this is a yes or no question. No explanation needed. Just yes or no.
I'll do my best.
Okay. It's binary. It's 1 or 0. It's yes or no.
All right.
Okay. You and 3 friends are out fishing, all guy friends. You guys are out fishing. Check into a hotel that night. They got 1 room left, 2 double beds. Do you sleep and share a bed with one of your guy friends?
You know, I can't do the binary answer on that. No, because you got to remember, Not only is this question entirely irrelevant to the it's irrelevant to the UFO issue, but also if you saw the 1988 Batman with Michael Keaton in the scene where she wakes up and he's sleeping upside down, that's how I sleep. I hang upside down like a bat. So everybody knows that.
Okay. So that's your answer. The answer is no. You don't have to.
I sleep like a bat. So yeah, make of that what you want. Yeah. I had a bunker before you did, buddy.
Man,
okay?
let me tell you something. You need to run for office. You need to run for office, man. You got the correct political answer. You're quick on your feet. All right. Now, I want to get to this quote that Chris presented in this article. And continuing the discussion, he says, last summer, I met with a number of DoD Inspector General officials concerning the inquiry into the manner in which the DoD has handled the UAP issue. When I mentioned the fact that I had heard that the members of the UAP task force were having trouble obtaining cooperation from the Air Force, one of the IC officials told me, quote, "The Air Force is always that way for some reason. In my experience, they are not only the least cooperative, but also the least competent program managers," end quote.
Well, yeah, it's a rather inflammatory statement. Again, I can't speak to that point myself, right? I would like to think that there's a certain efficacy, even eloquence to the inner workings of all the different military branches, and that they're very capable. Further, that they are also more concerned about, threats, for instance, from China, from Russia, and things like this, which they would deem to be quote unquote real threats. Now, again, I disagree on that point, but I'll illustrate it further by referencing a quote I got from a former Air Force official myself. There was an article I did right before the NDAA actually passed the Senate and the Gillibrand Amendment had been included.
So back in December. Okay.
Yeah, this might have been late November, but probably December. And, I quoted, let's see here. Jack Weinstein is his name. I was thinking Brett Weinstein, but that's a different Weinstein.
Yeah, that's a whole nother Weinstein. But that would be a good quote too, though.
It would be very interesting. Yeah, he won't respond to my emails. But yeah, Jack Weinstein certainly did. Now, he's a professor now at Boston University, but I think he was a former lieutenant colonel, I believe was his rank. And, he now teaches, policy and what have you and everything, drawing from his background and experience with the force. But he essentially said, look, there are so many more important issues that the Air Force should be looking at right now. And UAP, I'm sorry, is not one of them, no matter how important certain senators think that this is. And he runs down a list of a number of and they were also very important objectives with the National Defense Authorization Act that passed earlier this year. They were included, they did pass. And he said these kinds of things are the direct threats to national security by virtue of threatening the operation and functionality of the Air Force. Those should be the focus of, any group, any military, the DoD in sum total, not just, the issue over UAP. And he basically kind of ended by saying, let's focus on the real problems and not create problems where probably none exist. A lot of people pointed out that quote. It was requoted on Twitter. And again, as a journalist, what you want to do is you want to get differing perspectives. And I liked the fact that, Weinstein hadn't just been all in necessarily on, oh, yes, the Gillibrand Amendment will be great. I liked that he provided an opposing perspective. The problem was everybody grabbed that quote and they were like, you've done a public service, Mr. Hanks, by showing this establishment attitude that still persists and prevails. And I'm thinking, I don't know, I'm not so sure that that's what Jack was trying to do when he gave me that quote. But in the broader context of what Chris Mellon was talking about, the efficacy of the Air Force and how this, has been challenged by some who he's spoken to, I can't speak to that point personally, but I do know that they, in terms of how they handle the UAP issue, probably many of them still operate on that same sort of stigmatized attitude that Jack and others have expressed. Look, guys, we ended investigations in '69 because we didn't see anything there, because there wasn't enough of anything, even when we did see actual unknowns. And therefore, let's look at the real issues. Now, the problem there is pretty obvious if you understand the history of this subject. It's not that the Air Force didn't find anything. The Air Force Project Blue Book's own conclusions were simply this. Look, at no point have we seen that the UFOs, or UAP as they would be called today, represented a direct threat to national security. At no point did we observe anything that they said in their official statement that we could identify as an advanced technology that exceeded modern science or physics. And finally, there was nothing that we ever saw that was indicative of extraterrestrial phenomena, nothing that we saw that we could explicitly equate to being ET visiting Earth. Those were Project Blue Book's findings. They did not say there's nothing worth studying. They did not say we didn't see things that we couldn't identify. They said, in fact, there were hundreds of reports that remained unidentified. But again, you've got diligent researchers like Brad Sparks and others who have continued to go back over the logs. And you look at the actual quote-unquote explanations that were offered for some of those identified UFO cases, they were anything but identified.
Yeah, that's right.
In fact, there were probably as many as possibly thousands of reports that were not identified from the Blue Book catalog, but that were identified by the Air Force as identified for lack of any better conclusions. You know, they gave a conclusion or an identification marker when in fact no conclusion was ever actually made. So that's the reality of Project Blue Book. And yet, you know, I still see people tout this as, come on, guys, you believers, it's not good enough for you that the Air Force said they never found anything, that the Condon Committee said there's nothing worth studying. Well, again, go back and reread what they said. They never said that. They did find unknowns, and the Condon Committee even said maybe this should be studied in the future. But again, the problem is that, guys, here we are a couple of decades into the 21st century, and the Air Force is still touting that old line. So again, I think, you know, as a branch of the military, they're probably focusing on their main mission priorities and doing a fine job. But this, as the ODNI report stated last June, is a challenge to national security, and more significantly with relevance to the Air Force side of this, it is also a potential threat to aviators, both civilian and military. That should be something the Air Force should be paying attention to.
Well, and there's been a complete flip-flop from that point of view to where we are today, in that everybody is concerned with the scientific aspect of it, trying to figure out what is going on, applying science, applying study, and certainly a concern of something going on that there may be a threat and there is something to be concerned of. Completely the opposite of the conclusions in 1969. Here, take a screen grab. There it is right there. Take a screen grab. Look really close. There it is. That's what you want right there.
I couldn't actually make out what it was, but ladies and gentlemen at home, he was showing me his what appeared to be a smartphone. There appeared to be letters on it, but I couldn't make out the letters.
That's good that you didn't. And here's the thing. Apparently, only Navy pilots carry cell phones, right? Only Navy pilots are shooting stuff outside of the canopy. Only Navy pilots are seeing these anomalies in the sky. Only Navy pilots are willing to talk about this. Only Navy pilots have technology. Only Navy pilots have the internet. Only Navy pilots know what a frigging video is. And then this is pointed out, this is number 5 by Chris. I think it's extraordinary. He says, questions that need to be asked. He said, Congress and the public should be shocked that in the digital age, when our smartphones can answer most questions in seconds, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, the DNI, and Congress cannot get a straight answers about UAP from the Air Force many months after establishing a task force solely for that purpose. And that goes right back to my point. Only Navy pilots carry an iPhone.
Well, or let's look at this a little differently. Here's a really important question. Is it that they're the only ones that carry the iPhones, or is it that only Navy pilots leak their photos that they take of UAP, or that only Navy personnel leak videos obtained by Navy personnel? The real question to me is, with the abundance of information that's being collected by Navy personnel, do we really expect that nobody in the Air Force has done the same? So my question is, why have we had no leaks Why have we had no leaked information like what we've seen, comparable to what we've seen from the Navy, coming from the Air Force? Now, that begs a few interesting questions. Does the Air Force does it have a system of managing
their
that,
pilots? Yes.
Both their personnel and the information that they may be collecting? Is that managed differently, more strictly perhaps, by the Air Force than it is by the Navy? And therein lies another issue. I mean, that in itself, a restrictive culture of, and policy within a military branch. And I'm only speculating, frankly, but again, if that is in existence such that we aren't able to see the kind of data that their personnel may be collecting, but which we've seen abundance of from the Navy, that in itself is a problem.
It goes right back to the stiff arm.
Exactly. And going back, in fact, let's go even further back here, because as I mentioned, I wanted, when we had time, we weren't coming up on a break, to go back and look in a little finer detail at what was happening in the 1960s, and what really kind of led to, in my opinion, not the Air Force getting out of the UFO game and then people leaving them alone. No, their intent all along, I believe, was they wanted to be left alone. When you have multiple different studies, we go all the way back to the late 1940s, Project Sign, and again, this storied event that occurred that ufologists to this day, including myself, still talk about. There was purportedly an estimate that was produced, this estimate of the situation. And it seemed to, it wasn't saying UFOs, whatever these things, well, they weren't called UFOs yet at that point. Really, the popular colloquial, term was flying saucer, and that had been derived primarily from the press reporting on Kenneth Arnold's sighting from the summer of 47. Sign, they're looking at this and they're saying, we're trying to assess all the different things this phenomenon might represent. We don't know of any kind of Soviet technology. We don't know of any kind of, captured German technology. We have no intelligence that indicates that this is a U.S. technology and that these are our own experimental craft. Therefore, the only other possibilities, and they probably ran down the list, as many would today, there maybe are some natural phenomena that are little understood with our current understanding in terms of science and the universe. But then again, of course, in the instances where some of these things, notably that so-called Childs and Whitted encounter. This was a famous encounter where it was, I believe, a DC-10 that was flying along over probably roughly Montgomery, Alabama. They observe what looks like a great big rocket ship fly out of a cloud, pass in front of them, go into another cloud. This thing has got rows of windows, portholes down the side.
Right.
They were very startled by it. And in fact, although most of the passengers would have been asleep at this time, it was in the early morning, one of them did see a flash of light. And so they certainly were aware something was outside the window. There was also ground corroboration from another witness that was actually based on the ground. And this had been very instrumental in those early assessments. The estimate of the situation said essentially, based on sightings like that, we don't rule out the possibility that these things might be extraterrestrial. And of course, top brass hated that. They said, leadership in the Air Force said, no, we're not going to accept that. And in fact, they ordered all copies of this estimate to be destroyed. And therefore, Sign was followed. Its successor was Grudge, and Grudge took a much more decidedly negative attitude toward the study of UAP, probably thinking, and we're going to be able to, put the nail in the coffin on this, so to speak. But when that didn't happen, that transmogrifies into Project Blue Book by 1952, and it runs for nearly 2 decades. Now, you got to take into consideration, by the time, let's say, 1958 rolls around, the Air Force had already been in the UFO game for a decade. How much did they have? What did they really have to show for it? They didn't have hardly anything. And so by 1958, the Air Force was already, and I think we can offer some evidence. I've actually supplied you with an audio soundbite that I'd like to reference here. They were actively trying to convey to the public, look, when we investigate UFOs, we always take into consideration the possibility that there are unknowns. But essentially, we want you to know that 9 times out of 10, we can identify these things. Great example, January 20th, 1958, the Armstrong Circle Theater's UFO Enigma of the Skies airs on television. Among the guests had been Major Donald E. Keyhoe. He had been actually the director of the NICAP organization at that time, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. We also had Harvard astronomer Dr. Donald Menzel, a noted skeptic, and Colonel Spencer Whedon, giving the U.S. Air Force's position on unidentified flying objects. Now, to his credit, Whedon was open to the possibility and said so at the end that, the Air Force does from time to time detect unknowns. But unequivocally, those unknowns are not anything exotic or extraordinary. They are simply more conventional phenomena that we didn't have enough information to make determinations about. We are convinced that we could explain all the UFO reports if we had enough data, but in some cases we simply don't. So the public needs to understand the unidentified flying objects are merely that, unidentified, but with more data, we'd be able to explain them all. So that was the Air Force opinion. The problem with this show, and again, a lot of people have written about this. Anyone who's never read the first installment of Dolan's UFOs in the National Security State, Dolan goes in depth about this in his book and some of the politics that had been going on behind the airing of this program in 1958. The participants had to submit in advance their scripts. It was very highly scripted. And when you listen to it, you can hear it was very highly scripted. Whedon is, talking like this, and well, when we investigate UFOs, I mean, it's really like just, so
it's
beyond
theater. It's theater. It's theater.
I was about to say it's so beyond theatrical that it's just laughable. But yeah, theater is the word that came to mind for me too. Now,
but let me jump in. They rehearsed this.
Yes, they did.
They had all of the, I'm going to use the word censorist, right? So everything was closely monitored. It was rehearsed. The scripts were there. Things were prepared, and that was it. There was no going off script unless your name is Donald Keyhoe.
Well, yes. Now, let me also add this. Although Keyhoe was allowed to submit his script, they would also say, well, but in the interest of time, Donald, we got to take out this and we got to take out this. And they were eliminating a lot of the good stuff and saying, we don't have time for this. And so what did Keyhoe do? He didn't revolt. He said, look, 6 to 1, half a dozen another. I don't go on the show and I get no publicity for NICAP and raising awareness about our cause. I do go on the show and I stick with the approved version of the script that they have butchered, and I have an opportunity. But yeah, he went a little further. So Keyhoe goes on the air that night. Whedon has already spent, 10 minutes talking about how the Air Force can basically identify almost everything as a balloon or a bolide or whatever. Keyhoe comes on, he sticks to the script, and in the final segment, in the final seconds of that segment, he says, and now I'm going to tell the American public something you've never heard. We have that audio. I want you to play this audio soundbite I sent you earlier.
Yeah, I've got it here. It's 45 seconds, everybody. And we'll talk more after it, but that's a pretty good setup. Let's go ahead and roll this. Here it goes.
And now, Mr. Edwards, I would like to make a disclosure, something which has never been revealed to the public. For the last 6 months, our committee has been working with a Senate committee which is investigating official secrecy on UFOs. If the hearings are held, open hearings, I feel it will prove beyond doubt that the flying saucers are real. In order to secure the information we need,
that's it.
All of the citizens in this right.
Thank you, Major Keyhoe. One of the most eminent men of science who has taken a deep interest in the
that's what happens. And now here's the thing. This was a live broadcast. And the guy for CBS, his name was Herbert. Oh, man, I had it at that. Herbert Cyborg or something. So Herbert, he on the next night, Keyhoe was on the Long John Nebel show and comes on and speaks. And what happens there is they name Carl by name. They call him out, and Long John Nebel says that it's a 40-second fade that he does, and he slowly pulls it down. They made a point to bring out everything the way that CBS approached this, and effectively censored Keyhoe and rolled credits on the screen.
Yeah, indeed. What you're hearing again for everybody at home, and I want to point out that it seems like it was probably edited to bring in Menzel a little more quickly after that for the audio version that we heard. And again, the entire program can be heard via the faded discs catalog available on archive.org. Wendy Connors did incredible archival work providing basically a history of ufology in audio. And that's one of the files. But yeah, what you heard was Keyhoe being potted down. They dropped his microphone when he went off the script. Now, what's he talking about when they mute his microphone effectively? There was still like an offset microphone there that you could still hear a little of what he was talking, and he was still on camera. They brought his microphone down. What was he talking about? How he and Nightcap had been working with the Senate group about the issue of government secrecy in relation to UFOs. What happens? They turn his mic off. Big coincidence, right? We had a technical issue. Thank you, Mr. Keyhoe. No, this obviously had been planned. This is entirely what they were trying to do. They were trying to steer the narrative. Everybody had to submit their script, but it had to be approved. Keyhoe submitted his, but they butchered it. He went on air anyway, and then he went off the narrative. And what did they do? They dropped his microphone. They'd been prepared for the possibility that he would do that, and they had taken every precaution, knowing that their objective essentially was to control the narrative. So what was the narrative? What was being controlled? Well, if you listen to that entire program, as I pointed out, based on Colonel Whedon's appearance, it was essentially the Air Force saying, look, we've got a handle on UFOs. They can all essentially be explained, even the ones that we call unidentified. And there are crackpots and crazies who claim that they've had these experiences that often muddy the waters. And he even at one point said that those of you who are hoaxers, that may be against the law. Think about how much money is wasted by the Air Force in trying to track down what ends up almost inevitably being hoaxes. When we have a quote-unquote good UFO report, it's these cranks and weirdos, hoaxing these things. That should be against the law. Well, yeah, they were basically trying to really control that narrative. And when Keyhoe stepped out of line, they turned his microphone off. Now,
we're going to head to a break here, so I've got 30 seconds. So this is what he was saying. Here's the quote as they pulled the fader down, which is, quote, that the U.S. Congressional Committee was evaluating evidence that will absolutely prove that UFOs are machines under intelligent control. And then his name's Carl Borg. I said cyborg. Carl Borg.
I like cyborg.
CBS Director of Editing said the next day that the program had been carefully cleared for security reasons. There's no way that we would let Donald Keyhoe go off of script. And there you have it. And the Long John Nebel show the next day, the outrage in the UFO community that went on with it, this was a big deal. This was a live broadcast. And the time that Long John Nebel and Donald Keyhoe spent discussing this the next day is also worth everybody's time. Let's take our break right here, Micah. We've got to take a break. We will circle right back. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is here. We are discussing in depth Chris Mellon's new article over at the Debrief, Why the Air Force is AWOL on the UAP Issue. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Your 1 million gigawatt paranormal powerhouse, KUNX-DB, The X.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? UNX Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNX-DB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unxmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unxmedia.com.
Why is it we're not very good with our health regimen until it's too late? We don't put oil in the car until the engine blows up. When the body's out of balance, your health is not so good. Give your body some love. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheT.com. Try our Life Change Tea, which cleanses you from harmful intruders. A clean colon is one of the ways to bring the body in balance. We also carry organic supplements to help you get where you need to go. So do your body a favor. Log on to GetTheT.com. That's GetTheTEA.com. You can even visit our sales page to save some dough. Does anybody call money dough anymore? Anyway, if you're looking for short, helpful health tips, go to YouTube and punch in Health Matters Now. That's Health Matters Now. So, log on to getthetea.com, shop, get balanced, then learn some cool tips at Health Matters Now. You'll be glad you did. That's getthetea.com.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I only drink Fade to Black blend coffee from Rivermoon. Just click on the Rivermoon Coffee banner at jimmychurchradio.com. Promo code F2B Blend.
This is the only way forward.
This is Fade to Black. Make contact.
When you're in the house for longer periods of time, you can see them flying or running across the floor. Ooh, yuck. They're unhealthy, gross, and disgusting. Bugs. I loathe bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. On contact, it kills hidden bugs, including ants, roaches, and fleas. Plus, Orange Guard is a residual repellent. All of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally recognized as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard. Available at orangeguard.com, Whole Foods, and Ace Hardware.
Gold loves chaos, uncertainty, and disarray. History shows us what gold does when people aren't sure about the government, the stock market, their jobs, or their retirement savings. Our national debt is skyrocketing. Gold and other precious metals are a defense measure against inflation and a stock market that might take years to recover. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? Call United Gold Group. We offer gold and other precious metals delivered securely within 72 hours. Are you worried about the stock market? We can also help you set up a real gold or silver IRA or a 401k. Safe and secure. United Gold Group makes gold ownership affordable. Call now and get up to $2,500 in free gold or silver with a qualified IRA. Call 800-753-8534. That's 800-753-8534 or visit unitedgoldgroup.com.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why fade to black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network.
Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is here. Always great. I don't have to work. I just get to sit here, ask one question, kick back for 25 minutes to the break. You know, Micah knows how to support another host. He knows what's going on. Sometimes I need to take a night off. Here's the deal. I meant to bring this up before we went to break. I remember Keyhoe. I keep going back to Long John Nebel because I thought that was just an unbelievably great show and how pissed off Keyhoe was. And I could be wrong here, but I remember Keyhoe, Nebel wanted to blame CBS, right, for the censorship. And that's what they were calling it, by the way. They weren't playing around. They were saying that this was censorship. And Nebel's wanting to blame CBS, you know, the live broadcast. And Keyhoe said, no, it wasn't CBS, man. It was the Air Force. It was the Air Force that was doing the censoring. It was the Air Force that was there live. And I think that needs to be brought out. That was Donald's position. Don't blame CBS, blame the Air Force.
Yeah. And again, looking at this historically, we can ask, well, why did CBS want to control that narrative so badly? I mean, if there hadn't been, and again, I don't think that's an illogical or a conspiratorial assertion, Jimmy. Obviously, they were presenting very carefully so that it seemed like they were balanced. But I mean, it's the Air Force first with, Colonel Whedon. Then they bring in Keyhoe, but then they go to Menzel last. So it's skeptic, and then it's, the pro UFO guy, and then the arch skeptic at the time, which was, Menzel. It seems to me that it was very obvious what CBS was doing. They were presenting this narrative, and this narrative was very much in line with the Air Force's, not just positions, but the positions that they wanted the public to see.
Right.
And it was a control of information in certain ways. And I think that there are a number of reasons why that might have been the case. The obvious one being, look, the Air Force did not want the American people to believe that they did not have a grip on this this problem. Further, if the public believed that, they probably were concerned, and in fact, intelligence reports, later released through the FOIA process, detailed the fact that there had been legitimate concern throughout the 1950s that the Soviets might try to use Americans' concern over UFOs as a means of clogging communications channels and things like this. So again, indirect though that national security threat was from UAP, or UFOs as they were called back then, I personally still like UFOs, but that had been a concern, and they wanted to try to mitigate that in any way that they could. And so one way of doing that is trying to assure the American public through a controlled communication medium on national television with a pro UFO guy sitting there, hey, we've got a handle on this. And again, if it's CBS that's controlling it, why? What are they doing? How do they benefit from being less sensational, from silencing the guy who's making the extraordinary claims, who's going to shoot their ratings through the roof? That makes no sense. So I'm with Keyhoe on this one. I don't think it was CBS. I definitely think it had been the Air Force, and there was a very clear reason why, several in fact, that they would have wanted to oversee and manage the way that narrative was presented. By the way, Jimmy, people in the chat had been saying, why hadn't a lip reader just sat there and read what Keyhoe said when the mic was turned off? But you read the quote before the break. Do you still have that? And could you read it again?
No, I don't have it. Well, hold on. Let me, geez.
Don't worry. We can summarize it.
I have it. I have, man. Come on, man. I'm pro. I can do this. I can get it back. Okay, here's the quote. U.S. Congressional Committee was evaluating evidence that will absolutely prove that UFOs are machines under intelligent control.
Yeah, so that's what he said when the mic was turned down. Let me be clear. That's, so we do know what was said. And in fact, you can hear parts of it in the audio there. I haven't actually analyzed or enhanced that audio myself, but I'm betting you could bring out some of that, and no doubt people have. But we know what he said, and that's what was being said. And again, I think that that's an important point. By the way, if we have time toward the end, I know we're talking about Chris Mellon's article. I'm also seeing people in the chat mentioning John Keel, and I got to tell you, I'm a huge fan of John Keel, even when I didn't agree with all of his conclusions.
What chat are you in? There's so many chats. Which one?
I was looking at the one on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
The stream over there on YouTube. But again, John Keel might as well bring this aspect of his research up too at this point, because while we're talking about the history, and which to me, and this is key, folks, if you look back to the 1960s and the kind of, actually even earlier than that, as we heard in that audio, that was 1958. If you look at the Air Force's behavior and their attempts at trying to control the narrative going that far back, that's why we play this audio. That's why I brought that to the discussion tonight. You need to understand the history of the Air Force's activity in relation to this issue. They're trying to get a handle on it, essentially not being able to, but trying to present the facade to the public that they did, when in fact they didn't, and controlling the narrative, and in fact actually presenting a completely scripted narrative in that case on live television in order to try and convey that. But the following decade, what happens? Lonnie Zamora is driving along outside of Socorro, New Mexico, and he sees something fly overhead as he's chasing a black vehicle. And he says, well, I'm just going to have to let those kids go and go up here and see what this thing is. Maybe there's an aircraft in trouble. He goes up there and he sees essentially a Tic Tac on a tripod, right? Mm-hmm. With two little guys in silver suits outside the thing. And he says that they looked like they were kind of startled when he saw them. And they get back on board the thing and it takes off and it's roaring like thunder as it flies overhead. And he crouches down and gets behind his vehicle. When Blue Book had to go down there and investigate that, there was a fair amount of crow that was served in the pie they had that afternoon for dinner, because, I believe it was Hector Quintanilla who was the head of Project Blue Book at the time, and he had been not necessarily a proponent of there being a reality to UFOs. He seemed to be one of the more dismissive Blue Book heads, but he even had to say, look, based on the merit of Zamora's character, based on, even certain, there were very few, but there were certain traces that were left at the purported landing site, and they said it was clear that we were able to establish the location where he said he saw this thing. We could certainly see his tire tracks where his vehicle had gone up the hill adjacent to it and had actually seen the craft. Zamora as an officer of the law seems unimpeachable, and this has to be one of the best UFO sightings on record. And, again, when they were forced to have to essentially say, we can't explain this one, and we can't say that Lonnie's a crackpot or a weirdo or a hoaxer, some people did nonetheless try to say after the fact that he'd been mistaken. It was a candle balloon, nothing sophisticated. A bunch of kids at the local college, just messing around. Look, guys, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. But when you are faced with the apparent reality that there are legitimate things, and in this case, a landing observed by a police officer with the occupants outside this thing, whatever it was, this egg-shaped or tic-tac-shaped object, that's a real problem for the U.S. Air Force.
Well, that was the case that they spent money on trying to debunk, trying to solve, trying to figure it out. The lunar lander, test aircraft, every aspect to it that they could hopefully explain this away, they couldn't. That's the case that J. Allen Hynek said, you know what? This is the one that might be a UFO. This might be ET. That's the one case that they just couldn't whitewash. They couldn't do it.
No, they couldn't. You're absolutely right. They couldn't. And again, at that point, the Air Force began to realize they're like, we're never going to get out of the UFO issue, out of the UFO investigation game. But now it got even stranger, though, because by 1965, 1966, there was a wave of sightings. This is when John Keel got into the game and began doing his own analysis based primarily on interviewing witnesses himself and also collecting. He subscribed to newspaper clipping services back in those days because you didn't have the World Wide Web. And so he said he would get sometimes, hundreds of clippings mailed to him in a single day that were, newspaper clippings from newspapers all around the country reporting UFO sightings. And he would follow up with the editors of those newspapers. He would interview the writers who had covered the story. He would find the witnesses. He would talk with them. He would travel anytime he could to go to those locations and interview them. And, Keel did I have to say, Keel's early work was just groundbreaking. He was a really, truly scientifically minded researcher, but his conclusions took him into very strange areas. And again, we could talk about that later. The point is, Keel and people like that at that point were really hot on the trail. They thought, we can get to the bottom of this if we really study this thing, this UFO issue, because, there are a lot of sightings happening right now. This even garnered the attention of then Congressman Gerald Ford, and he criticized Allen Hynek. He said, I don't like you saying that our, the constituents in my state are seeing swamp gas, Mr. Hynek, and this deserves attention. It deserves congressional hearings. He was calling for congressional hearings. At this point, things really came to a head, and the Air Force realized, okay, we've got a real problem on our hands because we've got congressmen calling for hearings. We've got people all over the place saying they're seeing these things. We still, after at this point, more than 15 years in the UFO investigation business, the Air Force still had drawn no conclusions. They were obviously more than ready to be rid of this problem. And so they award the contract at that point to the University of Colorado, which was like the third or maybe fourth university that they went to. Mm-hmm. Didn't tell the University of Colorado they'd gone to other universities before that. When they finally accepted, they get Edward Condon on board. And anybody who thinks that that was a scientific study, again, I'll just point out the fact that even prior to its completion, there had been a revolt that occurred within the Condon Committee. Some of its members were dismissed, others left. But this all having to do with this memorandum that was leaked from one of the project directors, Robert Lowe. He's basically second under Edward Condon. And in this memorandum, Lowe is essentially saying, look, the trick here is to convey to other members of the scientific community that this is an entirely objective study. But those who are in the know, who are reading this, scientists in other words, they're going to see us as being a group of scientists, skeptics, who have zero to no expectation of finding a valid saucer. And furthermore, we're going to emphasize not the UFO report and the objects, but we're going to emphasize the psychological nature of the experience, the psychological analysis of the witnesses. We're going to have psychologists on our team who will help us analyze the witnesses and their mindset and their mental state, not so much the sighting of the object itself. When this memorandum leaked, I mean, first of all, it was when Condon found out who had been responsible for the leak, he called it treasonous, and that person was dismissed. And there was a book written about this by David Saunders called UFOs, Yes, Where the Condon Committee Went Wrong. And it outlines all the problems with that report. I mean, you had half your members, leave halfway through, a little less than halfway through. And so in short form, right there toward the end of the project's completion, new members had to be brought in, got up to speed very quickly, and tried to, cobble together this report, which had already been gravely, we might say, character assassinated, but it wasn't really character assassination. I mean, it had been the public trust in their ability to conduct a truly objective scientific study was entirely undermined. That would be a better word.
It was compromised. It was compromised.
When this memo came out, and again, they released their report. Their conclusions were very expected, very easily anticipated, and the Air Force followed suit. They got out of UFO investigations. That was the prologue to everything Chris Mellon is writing in this new article.
And I want to circle back to that. And I do want to make one point, though. I have always thought from the beginning that Colorado is an Air Force state. You've got the Air Force Academy, Colorado Springs. You've got NORAD, defense installations. It's an Air Force state. And you bring in the Condon report, the University of Colorado. The influence was always there from the beginning. We can say objective. We can say, you know what? When every approach to getting this report done failed, they fall right to the state that is under Air Force control, in my opinion. And we can't just dismiss this as being part of the influence of that. And the Air Force wanted this to go in one direction, which brings me back to your point. And Chris Mellon, believe it or not, this is all connected.
Yes,
Air Force wanted to control the narrative then, and they're trying to control it now by not being cooperative, right? By not, they have said things, they've made motions like they're going to cooperate, that they're going to establish this and they're going to do this within 6 months. Where's the evidence that they have done anything since the DNI UAP Task Force report of August 25th? Has there been any cooperation since? Was there anything done with the UAP Task Force report before it was released? And where is that oversight? Is the Air Force doing anything today? Or are they trying to, again, continue to control the narrative?
Right, precisely. Again, based on Chris Mellon's dialogue with people in Washington and whatnot, as outlined in the article that we published there at the Debrief, his take, and I asked for clarification on this. Have you gotten any indication that the Air Force had been compliant with providing information to the task force? That does not seem to be conveyed in the report. Although the Air Force is listed among the agencies that the UAP task force queried for information and that it hoped to coordinate with in the future. Now, it does state in the report that the Navy about 2 years ago had instituted this new formalized information reporting mechanism, right? A new formalized mechanism through which Navy personnel could report UAP sightings. And they say that, I believe it was in late 2020, if memory serves, that the Air Force also adopted that. That has been adopted. And in fact, after we published Chris's article, it was very nice of Robert Powell of the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. I'm a member of that organization, but Robert is, of course, one of our executive directors. He reached out to me with a short article, kind of in response. It wasn't a rebuttal by any means. He's very much aligned, I think, with Chris's positions. But he wrote back with a response saying that, coincidentally, while Chris was immediately preparing to publish this article, I've been in touch with an Air Force serviceman, and I was talking with him about a suspected UAP incident that occurred involving a warship at sea. We've heard a lot about those over the last few years. And so Robert had been following up with this gentleman, and he said that he had actually been a part of a briefing where he and other servicemen and women were brought into the room, and they were briefed briefly on UFOs. Briefly? In a brief? Imagine that. Right? I guess it was a debrief, but
yes.
And he said we were literally shown a chart with different general shapes, saucer, tic tac, different things that UFOs might resemble. Yeah. And he said we've never experienced anything like that. And so Robert Powell's takeaway from this was he said, this is hopeful because these were Air Force personnel that received this briefing. Now, that doesn't surprise me. I'm sure Robert probably isn't surprised either because, again, if we look at the ODNI report, what does it say? It says that, many months after the Navy did, the Air Force did finally adopt this same reporting mechanism that the Navy does, which is supposed to work more in the furtherance of removing the stigmas, right? You're not going to be made fun of. We aren't going to be humming the X-Files theme. If you guys say you see something, we want you to report it. Here's how to do it. And it does seem that is being reflected based on what Powell was told in this dialogue. But again, I hope that that's the case more so than what Chris Mellon has been told by numerous servicemen and women and others that he has spoken with in Washington who seem to convey to him. And I want to be very careful not to put words in his mouth, but you can read what he has actually says directly in the article.
I can put words in his mouth. Here he says the preliminary assessment report states that the United States Air Force began a 6-month, which you were just referring to, pilot program in November of 2020 to collect in the most likely areas to encounter UAP and is evaluating how to normalize future collection, reporting, and analysis across the entire Air Force. And then he goes on to say that some of the Air Force's oversight committees have been advised that last year the Air Force warned its personnel not to approach the UAP task force without prior approval, that there are also reports that individuals participating in classified DoD chat room devoted to UAP issues were subsequently interrogated by U.S. Air Force OSI officers who warned them against further participation and that these reports, he wants to know if these reports are accurate. Why has the United States Air Force been interfering with these important information sharing efforts?
Now, listen, again, I don't doubt that the Air Force is probably briefing its personnel, as Robert Powell indicated in his response that we published on Monday. I also don't doubt that the Air Force is collecting data on UAP. But what Chris Mellon conveys in that passage, in that portion of the article, seems to be, again, I would interpret that as being their attempt at controlling the way that UAP information is gathered and disseminated, collected by and then released from that branch of the military, which, again, to my earlier point, going back to 1958, we saw similar things playing out on national television.
Right.
Right, their control of the way that narrative was presented. Now, what's different between then and now? Well, then they were very concerned about UFO interest held by the public being exploited by enemy nations like the Soviets and used to our disadvantage, right? That could create a national security threat. Can we say that the same would necessarily be true today? I don't think so. I don't think so in a society, in a world, in fact, that is so saturated with information, with the World Wide Web. Everybody's got access to everything, all the summation of human knowledge. It's at their fingertips, and we carry it around in our pockets on a smartphone every day. And, I don't think that some of the same ideas would apply, but I don't think that the climate culturally, politically, geopolitically is the same as it was in 1958. We have to take those things into consideration, and maybe some of our officials do too, and that could be part of the reason why we have seen more information forthcoming. But again, as to the idea that many often ask, of course, Jimmy, and you and I talk about this, others, write in or call us on our shows and ask about this. Guys, are we seeing government disclosure? Is this the government finally are they fed up too, or do they recognize the kind of cultural changes that Hanks is rambling about? And are they saying, it's time for us to, let the people know, to let them know the truth? I don't think it's that at all. I think what this is, again, as I said at the outset, people like Chris Mellon, people like Lou Elizondo, who have been willing to come out of government to raise awareness about this issue, but to make sure that lawmakers take it seriously and that they get involved to help them know that their constituents don't think this is nonsense, that they take it seriously, and that by virtue of being our elected officials, who we appoint through the electoral process to represent us in Washington, that those individuals need to know this is an important issue for us. It's therefore important for you, and it's certainly important for our leaders, our leadership in Washington. That is the effort that has been underway for the last few years. And let me tell you something. We've seen headway. We've seen a sea change perhaps in recent years, but that effort's been underway for a long time. We go back to 1961, New York Times quoting Roscoe Hillenkotter, the first CIA director. And he's saying, guys, we don't have any data that these things are Soviet technologies. You had your first CIA director who joined NICAP and was, aligned with Keyhoe, publicly stating the Air Force tries to play down the severity of the UFO issue publicly. But when I talk to personnel behind the scenes, they say it's serious business and there's grave concern among the military and among our Air Force personnel behind the scenes, but publicly they don't convey that. Yet again, you had a CIA director pointing out what he thought was this kind of, this bipolar Air Force, back in 1961.
Yes.
Right?
And how do we, if we go back and think about the disclosure of ATIP, December 17th, right? And we talk about how extraordinary that was that the Pentagon's got a secret UFO program. And what big news that was. And here, so we've made this progress where the inside of the Department of Defense, they have a classified UFO chat room. Micah, they've got a classified UFO chat room where branches of the military can get together and talk about this. And the Air Force steps in and said, no, the Air Force is not going to participate in this. If you're a member of the Air Force, you are not going to jump into that chat room and discuss UFOs. That's as big a news as ATIP back in December of 2017.
Yeah, I would agree. Now, there's a part of me, Jimmy, that I really sympathize with the Air Force. I sympathize more with the personnel who actually have had experiences, as I no doubt believe they have, but who, as a result of this kind of hierarchical control, haven't been able to address this or engage this maybe in as they would under other circumstances. I can sympathize first and foremost with them, but even more broadly extending that to Air Force leadership. This is not an easy problem, right? I think Robert Powell said this, they've got their work cut out for them, right? This is not an easy problem for science. This is not an easy problem for the military. This isn't an easy problem for philosophers, right? We have yet, after so many years, to solve this problem. We don't know what these objects are in the sky. We don't know how long they've been here, and if indeed the accounts that we see going back to classical antiquity, that we see in the religious texts of ancient India, or in the Christian Bible, or in any other number of different traditional narratives from around the world. We don't know if those are indeed representative of the same sorts of phenomena that we observe in our skies today. I do know this, though. The ODNI said there appear to be objects. And this is a big takeaway, too, by the way, about that. Anybody who says, there was nothing in that report, we didn't learn anything in that report. To me, the most significant takeaway from the entire report was the other category,
yes.
The other bin.
Yep.
If you read the way that they describe the other bin, they say it very well may be that after all this airborne clutter, possible foreign espionage, all these different kinds of things that UAP might be, it very well may be that there are some phenomena that we just aren't adequately equipped yet in terms of our scientific knowledge to be able to study. And it will require further science advances and, in the future for us to be able to wrap our heads around this. But the UAP task force, and then there's one sentence at the end of that paragraph, the UAP task force intends to focus its further investigations on instances where what appear to be aerial objects are displaying advanced aerospace capabilities, right? They're flying in ways that are unusual, and they appear to display signature management. This, of course, involving the use of electromagnetic frequencies to essentially make it more difficult for you to be detected. Radar jamming and other things like that. Now, look, guys, as far as I know, and I'm no expert on ball lightning, but I have actually studied ball lightning-like phenomena that manifests down at Brown Mountain, North Carolina for years because I'm interested in certain natural forms of, or what I presume to be natural forms of UAP. But I would dare guess that if it's a natural phenomena, it's not going to have some sort of an innate capacity that allows it to jam radar systems, to cloak itself, and perhaps even functionally operate without being easily visible, let alone being detected on radar or other imaging systems, in use by the military. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've never seen these things go Mach 7 either. Right?
Let's take our break right here. You're absolutely right. Let's take our break. Micah Hanks is with us. We're going into overtime. We're only halfway through the show, Micah. I'm just letting you know, we're only halfway through.
Little way to go.
A little way to go. We'll be right back after this short break. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Stay with us.
Listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the X.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
This is Jimmy Church. Jason Martell's book, Knowledge Apocalypse 10-Year Anniversary Edition, is now available. Most ancient cultures speak of a time when their gods visited them. They never say their gods came from across the ocean or from the mountains. They always came down from the skies. Was ancient man visited by gods or extraterrestrials? We have not been told the full truth about our human past. There was a time when all the ancient cultures lived amongst beings they considered their gods. The search for truth leads us down the path of learning where the ETs might come from and why they are here. To understand some of these advanced topics and learn the truth about human origins, buy the new book from Jason Martell, Knowledge Apocalypse, now in its 10-year anniversary edition, available on Amazon.com by clicking on the banners over on our site, or simply visit jasonmartell.com. That's jasonmartell.com. This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and I take Life Change Tea supplements every single day. It's what I do. Click on their banner at jimmychurchradio.com.
Are you ready to read about true paranormal events? Unex Media publishes nonfiction books about UFOs, ghosts and haunted places, time anomalies, cryptid creatures, and more. Just like KUNXDB Radio, it's all about unexplained phenomena. Visit www.unexmedia.com to see our list of great book titles by Debbie Ziegelmeyer, Gene Walker, Devin Listrom, Wayne Lawrence, Bill Spicer, and yours truly, Margie Kay. That's unexmedia.com.
When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Yes, Rivermoon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from Rivermoon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today.
This is Billy Carson with ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. Forbidden Knowledge TV has just reached its 1-year anniversary. That's right, 1 year. And as a show of appreciation, we are giving all new subscribers a free 30-day trial of ForbiddenKnowledge.tv. That's 30 days to binge watch thousands of movies, documentaries, conferences, workshops, lectures, yoga classes, meditation courses, and so much more. So log on to ForbiddenKnowledge.tv from your computer or mobile device, or get the Forbidden Knowledge TV app on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon, iTunes, or Google Play today, and use coupon code 30daysfree. That's coupon code 30 days free on ForbiddenKnowledge.tv today.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JamieChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Micah Hanks is here, talking about Chris Mellon's recent article posted over at the Debrief. Why is the United States Air Force AWOL on the UAP issue? I think I just flubbed. I've said the title of that so many times, Micah. I think I know it by heart by now, but I think I flubbed it. But here's the point. In the short time that we have left, I have got 4 things that I want to bring up, and certainly Chris's conclusion or part of it, which he's very elegant in the way that he writes. But I want to bring up this point, and I'm going to read here. He says, and I'm quoting, "Is there a problem with the F-22 sensor system?" Now, I found this very, very interesting because Chris is very direct. He says, if not, how is it possible that Navy fighters with inferior sensors, right? Now, we're talking about an insider of the Department of Defense, right? Chris Mellon seems to know something here. So he says, how is it possible that Navy fighters with inferior sensors were routinely detecting UAP off the east coast of the United States for years, while the United States Air Force F-22s operating in the same training areas did not?
Inconceivable, in my opinion.
Yeah, inconceivable.
Yeah, I didn't say it like that, by the way. But
you know what? The best quote from The Princess Bride. I don't think you know what that word means.
My name is don't get me started with the quote.
Ergo Montoya.
Prepare to die. Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is, it seems inconceivable that what the Raptor, would be incapable of detecting. And again, even if it's not equipped with the same kind of forward looking targeting pod as the ATFLIR, they nonetheless have similar capabilities. They certainly have radar. They certainly have gun cameras. And they certainly have pilots who are as acute in their own innate visual capacities. When they see something, no doubt they see it just like a Navy pilot would. And I'll bet you this too, Jimmy. Something tells me they're carrying smartphones in their pockets up there too.
That's right. Hey, I'm going to make this really brief. At the Conscious Life Expo, the short version of this, because we're out of time. I'm walking out Sunday night, conference is over, and I'm walking out of the lounge, and I run into 4 commercial pilots. Are all standing in a group. It's the LAX Hilton, right? They're all standing there. and with their white shirts on, with the epaulets, and they got the captain, stuff. And they're all standing there, and I walked right into. I said, "Hey, you guys are right in the middle of a UFO conference, right?" And they all lit up, right? And I said, "Okay, just let me ask you this: Have you guys seen? Have you guys seen anything strange? Ever seen a UFO?" All four of them said no. There were two older guys, two younger, like two guys in their 40s and two guys in their 60s, right? So pilots, co-pilots. And one of the older guy, what did he say? And he goes, "This is a UFO conference, a UFO convention." He goes, "Really?" And I said, "Okay, if you had seen anything, would you tell me?" All four said yes. And then one of the older pilots looked at me and said, "Man, I want to see something. Been hearing about all these Navy pilots, right? Talking about what they've seen. I would love to see something." I said, "You guys have a good day," and walked away. But wasn't that interesting? Their interest was right there. And, yeah, it was pretty cool. Now let me go to we've got just a short time left. Here's a quote from the Department of Defense. Quote, "As we have said previously, the Department of Defense and all of the military departments take any incursions by unauthorized aircraft into our training ranges or designated airspace very seriously and examine each report," end quote. So Chris goes on to say, if this is true, why is the United States Air Force having such a difficult time identifying UAP records and reports? And that's a legitimate position to take, isn't it?
It certainly is. And let me just point out, I may be the editor-in-chief now, but I'm still also a reporter. My love in all this is writing, and I will continue to write on this just as, Chris has done and as Tim McMillan will continue to do. He and I, in fact, are working on some things together. I say that because in many instances when I have reached out to DOD spokespeople, that same quote, essentially verbatim, is always what is said. That is their official position, that being the reason why. If that is the official position, again, then it should follow that, as Chris points out, the information should be accessible, and yet it is not. Now, that can only mean one of maybe a few things, but however you cut it and whatever the reason is, the information is not being released. And I don't see that, Jimmy, as being fundamentally different from what we saw back in 1958, as we outlined in the audio earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then Chris kind of turns it around a little bit and said, you know what? If I was a journalist, I'm obviously putting words into or thoughts into Chris's head, but this is the way I would ask the Air Force these questions. 1, claims abound concerning the United States Air Force possession of materials that might definitively answer the question of whether a non-human civilization has found Earth. That would likely be the most tightly held secret in our government. What is your response to such claims? Right? And just go straight at them and try to get them to confront these issues, because this has been out there for decades. This has been repeated over and over again.
Yeah, I think that the earliest claims of recoveries, by the Air Force or any other branch of the military, go back to probably Frank Scully, and Behind the Flying Saucers, the earliest popular books on this subject. In the 1990s, the Air Force, despite its lack of involvement after the closure of Project Blue Book, again, at the request of Congress, because some congressmen and women were getting interested in the claims about the Roswell incident. And here again, public interest that was generated by the books that were being written by, Don Schmidt and, of course, Kevin Randall, Tom Carey, Stanton Friedman, Bill Moore, and Charles Berlitz, wrote the very first book about Roswell that was a public book in 1980. With all the attention it started getting, and then Unsolved Mysteries dramatizing it and doing an episode about that, there was significant enough attention that there were people saying, okay, look, we really need to get a handle on this. And so, the Air Force did reinvestigate Roswell, kind of came out of retirement, so to speak. And what did they say? They said, look, guys, these were mogul balloons. And now there are some researchers, I've mentioned Brad Sparks several times over the course of this conversation. He and others have actually plotted the flight paths based on available records of the mogul balloons, and they don't think that those actually match the Roswell story perfectly. That's
it's off by 4 years.
So well, now, in terms of things being off, in the Air Force's official report, they intentionally say, we think that a lot of the alleged witnesses are misremembering events that happened a decade later. And they use that in their defense of jumbling together all kinds of stuff that happened from the 40s all through the 50s and trying to say all of these things misremembered over the years gave rise to the myth that we now associate with Roswell. I'm less concerned with whether or not Roswell actually happened than I am with the way and the logic in which the Air Force presented multiple conflicting narratives and tried to find a way to justify lumping them all together and then blame that on the witnesses. That's kind of strange. But again, their official position, and the reason I mention all that is they, of course, said, no, we never recovered a flying disc there at Roswell, New Mexico. And I will point out, there is also some government data that seems to corroborate that position. I mean, I think a day after the Roswell incident allegedly happened, there was one page released by the FBI about that. And they were even saying in 1947 that our data seems to show that this was a balloon. So, I mean, so again, that's the official Air Force position. But there have also been other reports. Ross Coulthart's an interesting guy, and I did read his book, In Plain Sight. And he talks in the later chapters. I don't want to give it away. Everybody should read it. It's a very good book. But in the later chapters, he does talk about a high-ranking Navy official, I believe, that he spoke with, who had heard similar stories about crash retrievals and things. And at one point years ago, this, I'd all but kind of ruled that out. I'm back on the fence on all of it now. I really am.
I am too. I mean, I still go back everything and the witness and everything about Roswell. I can put all of that to the side. I really can. It's all great. I go back to the original Army press release that was absolutely pored over line by line at the most secretive installation on planet Earth, Roswell Army Airfield, in the most tightly held secretive state, a piece of land in the entire world, New Mexico. All of our brightest scientists, our closely held secrets were all there. And they knew what they were doing. And if you're going to release information like that, stating we've recovered a flying disc, that's done with intention. That's not an accident. Now, they had to backpedal the next, well, you know what? Ooh, that wasn't a good idea. We handled this the wrong way. And they changed it. But that original press release stands on its own, and we got to think about the time and place where that release was drafted and how that goes through a chain of command. That's not done by mistake. It's simply not. It's simply not. And like I said, all the witnesses, everything, all of that, put it to the side. Just go to what the Army Airfield released. And the timing of it and where and how. We're talking about New Mexico, our only atomic bomb wing in the world. Right? No, that press release was not an accident. They knew exactly what they were doing. So continuing on with Chris's questions, talking about the possession of materials. And he says, perhaps that information is deemed so sensitive that you and others, speaking to the Air Force, right, that you and others are enjoined from sharing it with the congressional oversight committees. So here is a broader question for you, the Air Force. Are you confident that we have sufficient processes in place to ensure that, at a minimum, any sitting president, Secretary of Defense, or DNI, Director of National Intelligence, would be aware of such information or made promptly aware if such information came to light? What about Congress? And that is so elegant right there, the way that Chris Mellon is pointing this out, that we need to go straight at the Air Force and ask these very important questions and issues.
And again, I hope that, as you know, Andre Carson and a few others have seemed to indicate, I mean, I hope that there will be at very least consideration given to trying to bring this before Congress and have, you know, actual official congressional hearings. Unfortunately, though, I would also say, and again, the E word you use, elegant, I think that really is the best summation of Chris Mellon's writing and the way he presents this article. He did a remarkable job. It was truly a pleasure working with him on it. But as far as why, you know, would this information, if it exists, be shared with the president, with the DNI, you know, with the Secretary of Defense, with, you know, congressmen and women? I've often heard people say over the years, why would you share that information with people holding temp positions?
Do you think that would be the Air Force response? I understand that that's an easy conclusion for us to come to. But do you think the Air Force
conclusion at all? Yeah. It's not a good conclusion, and it's not what we want. But I think in some ways it's the reality. Now, again, there's been much made of, for instance, statements over the years, like, for instance, Jimmy Carter going to then director of the CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush, and asking about UFO information and being told you don't have necessary classification for that. But keep in mind, at the time that he asked, he was, I think, president-elect and had not been sworn in, and he didn't have the necessary classification, having not been actually sworn in as president. And so what Bush actually asked, the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say, was Bush asked if Carter would keep him on in his administration as the CIA director, and Carter said, no, I'm going to appoint somebody else. And so Bush said, well, if you're not going to keep me on, then you would have to go through other channels to get that information. And here's what you could do. And he gave him some information, but Carter was still never able, as far as we know, to get access to that information. But again, many have asked based on that, you know, if a president can't get it, then who can? You know, the other side of that argument is, well, you know, he's going to be out in 4 years, at most 8 years. It's a temp position. And, you know, all discussion about redistricting aside, you know, so are, in theory, Congress and Senate seats. So, I mean, you know, are you going to get that information to somebody who may come and then go very quickly? Whereas the military establishment, the more bureaucratic elements within both the military and the intelligence community, you know, where individuals can be appointed and they may remain in a certain position for many, many, many years. You know, that seems to be where the real secrecy is held. I hope, to your point and to Chris's point, that the Air Force's response would not be, no, we're not going to give that information to people who are temp employees, right?
But isn't the Department of Defense and all branches of the military under the commander-in-chief?
Yeah, they are supposed to be directed.
Right. So doesn't the sitting president have the juice card to get whatever information he wants out of the branches of the military, including the Air Force and the UFO UAP issue? Did Carter go to the wrong? He went to the CIA. Should he have gone to the Air Force? And would the Air Force have to comply?
What's interesting is that I remember close to the end of his term, Obama was interviewed. And he mentioned UFOs many times during his presidency. But he said, you know, when you see the files on the JFK and Roswell, it's disappointing. But then, of course, more recently, he did a appearance on Late Night where he acknowledged, you know, there are videos of things that we can't identify. And he spoke about them as though he had not only recently been following all this like everybody else. Now, maybe he had, and maybe he just spoke very intelligently about it, and it was just a passing interest of his. If I'm to read into this, it seemed to me as though Obama had probably had some limited awareness of this from his time in office. But again, you know, I'm asking myself, you know, if I'm a U.S. president and I saw all the stuff that, I mean, has been released through the FOIA process to civilians from all the different branches of the military, from the intelligence agencies, you know, and even the insinuation that there was more that we haven't seen, that, you know, agencies like the NSA, when we were discussing the calls thing from the 1980s earlier,
right?
You know, all that would tell me as commander-in-chief, wow, there is a there. There's a huge there. And I'm going to do everything within my power to try and leverage my power as the commander-in-chief during my tenure in this position in the Oval Office to try and get to the bottom of this, or to try and bring this to the public in a way that is digestible and releasable that will not affect national security. A real question I have is why that hasn't happened yet. What is it? I mean, is there pressure that is placed? Is it that stigma that governs that at the end of the day? Well, I don't want to be remembered as the little green men president. Is there legacy? Are there cultural issues that trump all of that? What is that? What is that? To me, Jimmy, this is, simply put, potentially the most significant question that science or our military or philosophers of any era have ever asked. The implications go beyond potentially, depending on what this is, our own planet, but they certainly affect everybody on this planet. That has got, I couldn't imagine a better contender for the greatest issue of all time than this. Why is there so little traction?
Well, I learned a couple of things from tonight's show from you, and I love learning and getting my knowledge on. One, you sleep like a bat. And
yes.
Number two, you say meteorite correctly. Say it. Meteorite.
Oh, meteorite.
See, you say it correctly. Okay. Now look at your screen.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's holding what appears to be guano, so apparently you sleep like a bat as well.
That was gifted to me this weekend.
Yeah. Is that a meteorite?
Yeah, it is. A big, it's heavy, man.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that incredible? Isn't that cool? Look at that. Sits right here, man.
Now think about this. Think about this really quickly. I know that we got to go, but dude, here's the deal. So little as 150 years ago, there were scientists who did not believe that stones fell from the sky.
Isn't that right? Isn't that incredible? Isn't that incredible?
And to think that there are phenomena that literally fall from the sky and land in our fields, right? And that we can, on any clear night, go out and look at the stars and observe and see for ourselves, to think that people didn't know what that was, and many didn't believe that the little stones we find laying in the field were associated with those lights seen streaking through the sky. I couldn't imagine a better, corollary for, oh, wow, sometimes there are things that people see that can't be explained, but with time and with interest and with effort by scientists, we unravel these mysteries. Meteorites were mysterious too, and not very long ago. Remember that, ladies and gents.
And I'm gonna leave everybody with this quote from Chris Mellon. Sums it up. He says, quote, "The UAP issue is a serious test of our intellectual integrity and courage, perhaps even the ultimate test. Although it is a stern test, I believe our civilian policy makers have the courage and integrity needed to rise to the challenge," end quote, Chris Mellon.
Yeah, see, that's why I like Chris Mellon. As hard as I try, as much as I endeavor to try and, perfectly phrase everything in a short span of time about the UAP issue, he always somehow does better. And that's why everybody should go read the article. I mean, he does 7,800 words worth, so there's a lot to read, but I'm going to tell you, you will come away from reading that with a different perspective. It's at the debrief.org. Again, why is the Air Force AWOL on the UAP issue? It's a very relevant question, one that I think we need some answers to.
Thank you so much, Micah. When do you do your new shows?
My new shows usually drop on Tuesdays. You can find all the past episodes over there at micahhanks.com/podcast. If you just go to micahhanks.com, you'll find everything I do right there on the main page. And people are welcome to reach out to me on Twitter at Micah Hanks, or info@micahhanks.com is the email. I can be busy, so if I don't respond right away, don't get ill. I'll try to get back in touch soon. But again, I love to hear from people.
Thank you so much, Micah, and much success over at the Debrief. Everybody should go and check out right now over at the debrief.org Chris Mellon's recent article and the response to that, which is right above it. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Another great episode. Tomorrow night is Fader Night with open lines all night long. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Kevin. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2022 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, open lines all night long. Until then, be safe. It's time to fade to black.